Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video and Greg Terry Experience and Prof Gerdes Explains co-stream with Jonathan M.S. Pierce, Greg Terry and Professor Gerdes. We're all here to speak to you today about probably quite a lot of things that I assume we're going to spend most of the time talking about the negotiations. We were going to talk about the Signal security breach in the US, which is incredibly controversial and fascinating to talk about. But actually, it's kind of been superseded in the last couple of hours by the ceasefire arrangements that have hit the news. So we're going to take you through that. We're going to look at what the Ukrainians are saying about it, what the Americans are saying about it, and very importantly, what the Russians are saying, because actually it's different. Greg is probably going to be driving the conversation here, and Prof. Gerdes and myself just opining with our views on matters, as Greg's been looking a little bit more closely at this. But in the meantime, welcome, guys. That's the introduction. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Johnny, and to all Greg Terry's experience, and to all the friends there that are in this panel. This is going to be an interesting time together, and I just see a Fink arrived.
You know what he called you guys the other day, don't you?
What?
He misspoke and he said, hey, we have to do this with the two, and he meant to say the two Johnnies, and he said the two Finks. And I stuck up for you, Jonathan Pierce. I said, Jonathan Pierce may be in many things, but he is not a Fink.
Yeah, and I think I am something a bit different.
You are now.
See what I did there?
Into the tribe. The tribe.
Yes. I've always wanted to be in a cult. It turns out I can now be. Yes. So welcome to Jonathan Fink as well from Silicon Curtain, who has joined us too. So here we are discussing all of this. Where do you want to start, Greg? Should we have a look through?
So I've got everything laid out. I figured when the four of us were getting together and these plans came together, we really wanted to talk about the influence of the right and the media in the United States. And the Johns wanted to have a conversation with us, and we were going to go back and forth, but that'll be for another stream. Because today, the big news, of course, I know Professor Gerdes wanted to make a couple statements. We were talking earlier about the Signal breach and about the disaster. And I know people are wondering maybe our opinions, because we are conservatives, and we maybe just start there for 4 or 5 minutes. And then what I've done, guys, is I've laid out everything that is unfolded in the last 4 or 5 hours in a logical order. The agreement. I can tell you right now, Mykolaiv has already been hit in the last 20 minutes, and the power has went out in Mykolaiv. So however that works for you. So I've got Zelensky's statements. I've got the agreement. We've got the Russian response, the Russian counter agreement that they released on the Kremlin. We've got everything. So let's just go for it. Do you guys just want to start on that Signal thing for a second?
Anywhere you want to start. I have a comment that says that word on the street is that Hegseth dropped the nuclear codes in various Pokemon card booster packs. So stranger things have happened, I guess.
The main thing to say, I mean, the simple synopsis is: 1, it was bad. 2, they're not going to own it because these guys won't take responsibility. 3, they'll shoot the messenger, i.e. Jeffrey Goldberg. 4, they won't sack anyone. 5, they will be, in so doing all of that, complete hypocrites, because every single one of those people, to a T, and Donald Trump included, absolutely attacked Hillary Clinton for something that was operational security wise actually far less than what these guys.
Okay, I'm going to contradict you there. I'm going to say that it was equivalent, and it was not far less. But if you were, like I was, saying that Hillary, what she did was wrong, and I did say that at the time. This is wrong too. You got to,
that's what I mean.
Call a spade a spade. I'm not going to let you get away with that and say there was far less, but it.
Well, no, that just empirically there was less, because that was like in abstract, like she was.
But that's only because we don't know what all has been on those servers or in that. Right? So it was still a breach.
So with the knowledge we have now.
Yeah, these were both breaches of security that never should have happened, and a private first class would have been locked up for that, where the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense are being given a pass, and that neither of those scenarios are okay.
my
not
point
only
was
given a pass, but minimized by the commander in chief of the United States. Minimized. Secondly,
That's
I would
right. A
also
half hour ago.
minimizing it, okay, which is a disaster. Secondly, let's just be fair, Professor Gertis. He's got us on the right side of the screen and they're on the left. So here's what's interesting. If this had happened and it was Joe Biden's administration, let me tell you something. Donald Trump would have went bonkers on Twitter, on Truth Social, to
Sure.
burn down the White House, Washington, D.C., and half of the known world. So it's a tragedy.
shows the
Secondly,
power of Fox.
it
Shows the
does.
power of Fox.
Well, it shows the power of us to rationalize things. If we were all behind a Rawlsian veil, Jonathan, if we were all behind a Rawlsian veil of ignorance, and we saw both what Hillary had done and what was just done now, we would have condemned both of them.
Absolutely. I mean, what I was saying about empirically, so Hillary Clinton's issues were empirically less because we know 100% that there is a conversation that is now in the newspapers of an operation that was taking place that had that gone to the wrong person, rather than Goldberg, who was a decent person, didn't spread it or didn't cause any issues.
Credit to
what
him
I'm saying
too.
is that, yeah, absolutely. Empirically, there's a difference because actually one was an operation that was taking place and blah blah blah, whereas we just don't know about all that other stuff. But anyway, that's
I know,
what
Mr.
I
King.
was showing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll shut up after this. I was showing Hegseth condemning her in 2016. This I just put together. I'm about to put my video out for my 3 big stories after we're done with this, and I show Hegseth talking about in 2016. This should never have happened. Anybody with any kind of security clearance like I have. Oh.
So I did an hour-long video on the fallout, and it had Hegseth, John Ratcliffe, it had Donald Trump, it had Tulsi Gabbard statements, and it had Mike Walls, and all of the people saying this back in 20 whatever, all together, complete hypocrisy. But yeah, there you go.
My big question, and then it's all you, Mr. Fink, would be why is this level of communication happening on Signal? Okay, first of all, which has proven itself over the last 3 years of the war in Ukraine to be hacked nonstop by Russian operatives, to the point we use Signal. In fact, Jonathan's and I are in a Signal group, but there have been times where we communicate with soldiers on the front lines, and the soldiers will say, do not communicate on Signal this week. Russia has it. Let's go to a different platform. And our American strategy is being unfolded on that platform. Maybe they know, they don't know, but it's how can that level of communication happen on Signal?
And we're clear in the group. We've got a group where we share ideas, and okay, it might be useful for Russians to see it, but ultimately we don't share anything sensitive in there. There's no technical data, there's no operational detail, and whenever someone pops up and goes a little bit too far, we say, take this, one-to-one somewhere else on something is secured. This is the challenge, I think, is in watching the reaction of Fox News. And watching the hypocrisy, it's all very well, turning it into a left-right issue, which no one here is doing. But, if one side decides that it's not going to play by the democratic rules, and it has a media machine such as Fox News, which today, quite a few of the commentators came out, and I would not be able to distinguish their blah, blah, blah from North Korea. I mean, they literally came out and okay, maybe it's a minor mistake, but actually now we can all see, they're doing their jobs and this great decision-making process. The messages reveal that they slagged off allies, that they further worsened relationships with Europe in some of those messages. Yeah. And, it's not a sort of pat on the back, job well done. It's an absolute catastrophe. My problem here is, yes, no accountability on the governmental side, but there is a North Korea-style media operation that's got their back.
I honestly think Fox News, they are still so powerful. I keep talking about how 50% of the population are in that ecosystem, whether it's Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, plus associated like online spaces, and there's a real malnutritionist diet going on there of information, and literally Fox News have turned this into a positive by saying, oh, it actually shows great cooperation between these people, great transparency, and all this stuff. It's like, really, you would say that about Hillary Clinton? I don't think so.
That's not what I just saw on Fox. What I just saw was Trump speak, and then I saw them not know exactly what to say or how to say it. Like the broadcaster that came on immediately after that was like, and so there was this meeting, and there like she just didn't quite have the words together to try to figure out how do I explain this. So you probably are right that they will try to say it. I'm going to be watching for this.
They certainly did that earlier. They did that earlier.
Oh, did they earlier? Okay,
It.
so
Yeah,
I just don't get it. Yeah, I mean,
I showed a load of Fox clips on my video where they honestly, some of it was outrageous. A couple of them, interestingly, Peter Ducey, I think, was a little bit more forthright, but you know, poor Jessica Tarlov in the 5 having to go against like Jesse Waters and Greg Gutfield and Janine Pirro, but you know, just yeah, there is an awful lot of propaganda trying to turn this on its head. Although surely they have. Well, I think we're in a stage now where they don't have to admit stuff. Where you can. I just suggest that Trump will go through this blithely, either ignoring it or lying about it to the point where truth doesn't matter anymore. And
so now here's the good thing, and it's not a good thing, but you actually got to see the reality of the way that they view Europe. Right? You got to see the raw, unfiltered view of this is how they think. Oh, these freeloaders, I'm right there with you. I loathe Europe. Okay, this is MAGA talking. There is a very hostile, you are the problem, we have to fix it for you, and you freeloading kind of something. So it's out there. That's where they really are. And that's explanatory of why they're so much cozier, partly explanatory of why they're so much cozier with Russia, because they see Europe as part of like woke European continent style or something along those lines. I don't know exactly what it is, but they see something in Europe they find very distasteful. That is MAGA-like talking. That's not conservatives talking. That's a different thing. And so that's what I want to throw out there, because I think this is useful.
There was a really interesting observation to be made, and that was that actually JD Vance appears to have a different interpretation of what's going on in foreign policy to Donald Trump. So there is a bit of a disagreement there that came out of that conversation from the article, and that's quite fascinating. That there is, and he's willing to put that in a public space with 18 other top people, 17 other top people there. So there's an interesting dynamic to possibly show that these two don't have the same grip on what's going on with the Houthis and their policy in the Red Sea area. So I think that was worth noting. Someone's asked, are heads going to roll? I don't think so. I think they'll circle around the wagons, and there you go.
Okay,
but it's
here we go.
Interesting that someone lied under oath today as well. So in those hearings where you saw a whole bunch of people interviewed by was it the Intelligence Committee? You have people lying under oath. Absolutely 100%.
Well, that's never happened in the history of the world before. So, but anyway, okay. So you can see Professor Gertis, myself, and the Johnnies, Pierce and Fink, we can see where we have agreement, where we have a view that this is disgusting. All this is happening on the American side. But I'm sure the overwhelming majority of you on all of our channels right now are maybe in shock, maybe misunderstanding, maybe confused. You have no idea what is going on. You're just seeing headlines, you're seeing threats, you're seeing all of this unfold from the negotiations that have happened in Saudi Arabia. And now we have the results. I can tell you that in general, Ukraine had about 3 hours total with the United States, and Russia had over 12. And we know that basically the Russian talking points have come out. Johnny Pierce is now putting up the official statement, and I'll let him go through this, and then we've got the breakdown of everything. But if you do not know who this is from Rustom Umerov. He is the defense minister of Ukraine. And here you go, Johnny. This is
Yeah, so
this is what we're understanding. This is Ukrainian understanding.
So this is the Ukrainian understanding. Then we can look at the White House statement, and then we'll look at the Russian statement. And as I previously said, there is a difference, and it's significant potentially.
Can I also add something to this?
Yeah.
This is a well scripted, really well tweaked for political palatability for every, like they really work to get this said in just the right way in order to look like be a good team player and work along. It's not just like, I wouldn't just take it at face value. I would say that they're really trying hard to look like they're playing nice.
They being Ukraine.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so that is correct, and we'll let Johnny go through this. I will tell you right now that I do have Zelensky's translated statements from just within the last hour, and it's not as politically scripted.
That's what I mean.
Exactly.
He's not too. You can sense his frustration. Yeah,
it's unacceptable. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Umarov says Ukraine and the United States held bilateral technical consultations in Riyadh, focused on the security of energy and critical infrastructure, safe navigation in the Black Sea, and the release and return of our prisoners and children.
Pause. Pause.
Yeah.
Sorry, I will not pause you again. What in the heck? You have basically
language, Greg.
I did heck. What in the heck? You have basically the precipice of World War III, and we are having to talk about a thieving, invading nation who has stolen children to become a part of a good message or a negotiation. We're talking to this invader about returning our children. That is absolutely disgusting that topic even has to be stated in the world in which we live. And I'll leave that one alone.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complex than that, actually, or not controversial than that. Is that I think that's only been included because they cut the funding to the people who were in the Yale University project that was helping to collate all the evidence of the war crimes concerning those children. That then blew up last week. That would not have been in this agreement had that not been an explosion in the last week or so. I think that's
but it should be like the number one big story here is civilians are being killed and children are stolen. Like that should have been way over the top of like the first thing you want. And that should be the message everywhere before you do anything else. Give us our children back. Stop blowing up our civilians.
100%. But the point is that it was almost as if the American negotiators had never even thought about these. I mean, you've got to remember that Putin is an indicted war criminal in the International Criminal Court because of this, right? And yet the negotiators, when they've been questioned on this prior to the USAID funding being taken away, had never talked about this. They didn't want to cast opinions on it. And I think that actually shows a kind of a terrible approach of the negotiators, who are only thinking in terms of economic gain for the US and not thinking about moral outcomes for Ukraine and its people. And I think that just the inclusion of that tells us that story, in my opinion. But anyway,
keep going, Jay.
Yeah, it continues. Fulfilling the task of the president of Ukraine, we continue to work on bringing a just peace and ensuring security for our country. This meeting is a logical extension of the successful consultations with the United States in Jeddah. No one wants a just peace more than the Ukrainians, and our position remains honest, transparent, and consistent. Key outputs. 1. All parties have agreed to ensure safe navigation, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes in the Black Sea. Important. The Ukrainian side emphasizes that all movement by Russia of its military vessels outside of the eastern part of the Black Sea will constitute a violation of the spirit of this agreement, will be regarded as violation of the commitment to ensure safe navigation of the Black Sea and threat to the national security of Ukraine. In this case, Ukraine will have the full right to exercise the right to self-defense. 2. Parties agreed to develop measures for implementing the president's agreement to ban strikes against energy facilities of Ukraine and Russia. 3. All parties welcome the good offices of third countries with a view towards supporting the implementation of the energy and maritime agreements. 4. All parties will continue working towards achieving a durable and lasting peace. 5, with Ukraine, the US reiterated its support to help achieve the exchange of prisoners of war, the release of civilian detainees, and the return of forcibly transferred Ukrainian children. So that's the US reiterating its support to help achieve those. There's nothing concrete. It's just, that's kind of a bit vague, really. Anyway, for the effective implementation of the arrangements, it is important to hold additional technical consultations as soon as possible to agree on all the details and technical aspects of the implementation, monitoring, and control of the arrangements. So the first question I have for you guys is just, okay, assuming that this is all correct, and let's assume that that's actually what all sides agreed to, when is it implemented? And I know that's going to give us cause to refer then to the Russian side of things. What do you guys think about the implementation of this? Are we expecting this straight away?
I can answer, and then we can get Professor Gertis and Mr. Fink's response. Zelensky quoting within the last hour, starting, and I'm quoting, I translated this, guys, starting today, it is forbidden to attack each other's energy resources, and a ceasefire in the Black Sea has come into effect. If Putin violates it, I will ask Trump for weapons and sanctions. Now, that's that view. We have to go to the White House. The temporary, quote, coming in from Trump within the last hour, the temporary moratorium is valid for 30 days, starting from March 18th, 2025, and may be extended by mutual agreement. We will consider the Russian request for sanctions relief that the Kremlin sent out after. So Ukraine views it as today, Zelensky's quote. Russia and the United States view it as March 18th.
Okay, and then this is then when we go to the Russians' statement, because actually their sense of the agreement is not immediate, but is contingent upon the concession of the US and by extension Ukraine in terms of sanctions relief. Is that how, am I correct in saying that?
Okay, so, and I want to make sure we get Jonathan and Prof to answer here, but so once this was agreed upon between the United States and Russia, that's who agreed upon this. Ukraine had put out their information in their meeting, the talk about children. There was no talks about territory. Sorry for closing my eyes. I'm trying to remember everything. Once that was starting to come out, the United States made their statement that we're going to have this moratorium on the Black Sea and energy infrastructure. Then Russia said, yeah, we're going to have this moratorium on the Black Sea and we're going to have a moratorium on energy infrastructure. And Ukraine said the same thing. After that, then the Kremlin posted an official response and document on the Kremlin site, and it states, you can see it there. Johnny has it up for you. I will read it to you now. Not all of it, just the main points. The Kremlin published its own statement after the conclusion of the Russian-American talks, this suggesting that Russia will further agree to ensure security in the Black Sea and not attack civilian ships and energy infrastructure only if sanctions are lifted. And then they spelled them out specifically. Number one, you must lift sanctions against Roskosbank and other financial institutions and reconnect them to SWIFT. You must remove restrictions on trade financing. You must lift sanctions on producers and exporters of food and fertilizers, as well as insurance companies that work with these goods. And remember, about 45 days ago, they went after the insurance company with sanctions, and it was a big deal affecting many nations around the world. Next, remove the ban on servicing Russian vessels in ports. Next, remove restrictions on the supply of agricultural machinery and other goods related to food production in Russia. Zelensky responded, the Kremlin is lying about the alleged silence in the Black Sea. This is his statement tonight where he took the gloves off. The Kremlin is lying that allegedly silence in the Black Sea depends on lifting of the sanctions and their further request, also with the start date of the energy silence being March 18th. This is a distortion of the agreements. These are absolutely clear statements coming from the White House on how we're going to proceed.
Who said that last thing, that the Kremlin is wrong? So where did he say that?
On his evening address on video. I
Right.
listened and translated it.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing I could see that he's put on Twitter is how Russia behaves in the coming days will reveal a lot, if not everything. If there are air raid alerts again, if there is renewed military activity in the Black Sea, if Russian manipulations and threats continue, then new measures will need to be taken specifically against Moscow. Diplomacy must work, and from the Ukrainian side, we are doing everything to make that happen. I thank everyone who is helping. I'm grateful to the United States for the constructive and effective work of our teams. Now, results are needed from Russia. We do not trust them, and frankly, the world doesn't trust Russia. They must prove that they are truly ready to end the war, ready to stop lying to the world, to Trump and to America. Now, those air raid sirens you're hearing now, do you think that that is already an example of one, them breaking the agreement as understood by Ukraine and the US, or two, that they have this understanding, the Russians, that actually is not enforced until the sanctions are lifted?
I can confirm right now, air alarms are happening in Sumy, Poltava, Cherkasy, Kirovograd, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Donetsk regions. And I can also tell you that Mykolaiv just 30 minutes ago was struck by Shaheeds, and part of the city was de-energized. There are Shaheed strikes right now in Kharkiv. There are Shaheeds flying over Poltava, and there are Shaheeds flying over the Mykolaiv region in the Bashtanka area. So how can it not?
So the long and short is there's no meaningful agreement.
Correct.
So there is perhaps something that will take place in the Black Sea, assuming that Russia can get past 2 hours to break it.
If we go by the 18th, wasn't it broken already?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was, I mean, so, I didn't see anything meaningful coming out of this. I mean, what I saw was some nice messaging from Umarov to say we're making progress, and I don't see any real deal in a meaningful way, at least not one that'll stick. But tell me if I'm wrong. What am I missing?
Jonathan Fink.
So I don't think you're missing much, unless this contains specific detail about how this is going to be enforced. How are ships going to be checked in the Black Sea? Who is going to monitor infringements and what the penalties are for these? Then none of this has any force. It's as if we have a sort of goldfish mentality. It's as if we have not been observing Russia for the last 11 years in detail. And they're breaking of every single agreement, shelling refugees as they flee after safety corridors supposedly were created, massacring Ukrainian troops after supposedly sort of ceasefires were agreed. They have a history of breaking every single agreement multiple times until they decide it's no longer beneficial to stop blocking things. And that that will include the treatment of the Azov prisoners who were taken onto Russian soil and then blown up in the prison they were kept in. Russia breaks every single agreement. So whether this is through sheer naivety, that we're going down this path of choosing to trust them, whether it's thought that is expedient and is going to get towards some kind of lovely deals or so on, I don't see this unless Putin has realization that his economy is about to go belly up. I don't see any reason why he adhere to whatever is agreed on paper. I have no reason to believe that he won't play games with the wording over and over, because we've already seen that. We've already seen that with translated versions of various agreements being different from, the White House versions. Even last week, the White House version said energy and infrastructure, and then when the Russian version came out, it just said energy infrastructure, and then they immediately started hitting other types of infrastructure, hospitals, and so on. So they're going to play games all the way through, I think. And if Putin did have some worries about the economy, well, this agreement lifts our boot off the neck of the Russian economy. It means that Putin has reason to think he could carry on fighting, because that pressure on his imports and exports are starting to be lifted. And the internal pressures that he may have been responding to, such as they are, will also be lifted. I don't mean from the populace, but from oligarchs and so on who are squealing. I see this strategy leading to nothing but more Russian aggression at this point, unfortunately.
Well, no reports here says Trump says, I presume this is a recent meeting. It looks like a cabinet meeting pretty much, but with loads of people there. We will consider Russia's request for sanctions relief, a move that only benefits the aggressor, I think is what no reports are saying. He also stated that Ukraine and Russia have agreed on a Black Sea ceasefire with third-party monitoring, and claimed that significant progress has been made towards ending the war, as well as here's a quote: "The US is considering the conditions that Russia has put forward for a truce with Ukraine at sea. We are thinking about all of them right now. There are 5 or 6 conditions. We are considering all of them," which is ridiculous.
There you go.
Ukraine was unconditional in their demands, or not their demands, in their acceptance of a ceasefire, and Russia have put the conditions on, which is like, if the US go along with that, then I would just call the whole thing off. But then we get back to, what is it that the US is providing for Zelensky that means he can't just call the whole thing off, that he is indebted.
It is a skewed response that is just like, there's not much thought process that goes on in what comes out publicly, unfortunately, with Donald Trump. But I can tell you right now, 100%, that the Trump administration is reviewing the secondary document released by the Kremlin. That was not a part of the initial agreement that Ukraine put everything, the cards on the table. Zelensky said, we're willing for everything. He had 4 or 5 statements tonight, by the way, Johnny, not just his one main one in the evening. So a lot of this I'm pulling from different statements, but he says, we're willing to do everything: sky, sea, frontline. We want to end the war, but we can see who does not want to end the war by their actions. So the ceasefire in the Black Sea and energy infrastructure, then once Russia responds with their terms that are after the fact, now you're actually seeing whatever you just shared, their NOAA reports or whatever it was accurate, because it's coming out that the Trump administration is reviewing the sanctions request relief that the Kremlin has provided. I can also tell you right now, 10 Shaheeds are targeting downtown Kryvyi Rih. So now we're another region, and they're under the attack right this second. Additionally, video coming out when all of this came out, then the Intelligence Department of the United States released a nuclear warning that we're heading toward nuclear war if things aren't stabilized, et cetera, to bring fear, of course, upon Ukraine. But CIA director, Ukrainians will fight with their bare hands if necessary. I am convinced, based on my reflections and intelligence, that they will fight with their bare hands if necessary if they are not satisfied with the terms of the peace agreement. So I'm just seeing that now. So I don't think we have anything, to be quite honest.
So going back to the strikes on Kryvyi Rih, like, this is from the Guardian article on the agreement. The ceasefire would begin immediately after the White House released the statements, as Zelensky said, although the Russian demand for sanctions relief in the Black Sea means the conditions for a halt in fighting at sea have not been accepted by Moscow. So that's kind of what we're talking, which leads us to go, well, what the hell is going on? Then it's this part. It would initially be self-policed, Ukraine said, although both sides agreed that other countries could become involved in monitoring and safeguarding it. Zelensky acknowledged that, quote, "We have no faith in the Russians," but said that despite this, Kyiv intended to be constructive in its efforts to end the war. So if it's self-policed, then Ukraine could say, well, they've just struck at energy targets in Kryvyi Rih, so therefore it's all over straight away. And that means that the US have to then start putting added, pressure on Russia, but then the US must be kind of implicitly admitting that the ceasefire hasn't begun because they're still reviewing the conditions put forward by Russia. So it's all just a complete mess.
27 minutes ago, the strike on Mykolaiv, a significant portion of the city is without power right now. If that's not an energy infrastructure attack, I don't know what is.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I have a question for you all. I just put the lyrics to "When a Man Loves a Woman" in the chat. Okay. Do you remember the song "When a Man Loves a Woman"? Okay, so this sounds like Trump thinking about Russia. Can't keep his mind on anything else. He'll trade the world for the good thing he's found. If she's bad, he can't see it. She can do no wrong. Turn his back on his best friend if he puts her down. Okay. What's motivating that? I mean, as far like, no, seriously, because that's what comes out like it's like he's blind or can't see, like, or isn't willing to see, or and so is he, in your estimation, compromised or just blind or ignorant, or where is he? Because
Yes.
I'm looking at him going, I don't see the compromise thing. I've read different accounts of things, but he just can't seem to think that these guys are the bad guys. He just can't bring himself to that.
He is. Sorry,
Well,
I let you go for it, Jonathan. But I've done a whole video on this, and my interview with both Malcolm Nance and Zarina Zabriskie was on exactly this topic, which is I think he is somewhat compromised, although he would see it more as being an alignment. I think he's aligned, but he's aligned probably because he's also an asset, and he's an asset because he's aligned, and there's a codependency that goes on there, and he's a useful idiot, and he's also deeply ignorant about all of the things that you would need to know in order to make informed decisions about geopolitics. He's ignorant of the history, the politics, etc., and it's money, and it's grifting, and it's all of the above, and he just wants to be Putin.
How can he possibly be compromised is my next question, because like what shame does he have? I mean, given what we just saw that he was.
I can't wait to listen to Jonathan Fink answer Darren.
Go ahead.
Let's do it.
I mean,
baby.
I've spoken to people who believe he's seriously compromised, but of course they point out that actually, your normal compromise is just not going to work. Even clips of prostitutes and golden showers, even that wouldn't really probably make a dent. So it would have to be something either very personally embarrassing or to do with sort of kiddies. But there's not that much evidence. Okay, he hung around with the Epstein guy, who's sort of known for his penchant for underage, but. So this is all very circumstantial. I'm not sure we even need that stuff to explain his actions. And I think actually it's far more scary to think of Trump in alignment as opposed to just being, an asset. Because if he's alignment, it means that he sees far more value, far more logic in Russia's business model. That business model does not recognize sovereign borders. It only recognizes large imperial blocs with spheres of influence. It does not accept that small countries actually have sovereignty. They are the playthings of large empires. Also, the Russian mentality is about informal power. It's about mafia dynamics, and it's about extraction. If you look at it, people often say, but yes, he was a businessman, etc. Well, I've been in business for 25 years. And quite honestly, his mode of business and understanding of it does not resemble the one that I understand, because I've been in high tech. I've been in service industry. People there do not operate and think in that kind of extractive, acquisitive, dumping at everyone way. Well, there's a few that do. But generally speaking, you look at the world as a pie that you can actually multiply, right? Okay, it's a pie now, but if I do X, Y, and Z, I can have 2 pies, 3 pies, 4 pies. But that kind of requires some form of cooperation. He looks at the world in a very primitive manner, quite possibly, because of the business he comes from or his mentality. And that is the pie is finite and you have to fight over every slice because it's not going to get bigger. That fundamentally is the Russian mentality of doing business. And that seems to be his mentality. It's far, far scarier. Why? Because it means that when he talks about Greenland and Canada and divvying the world up, it means he is not joking. That is how he sees the future of the world. And that's actually far more terrifying.
Yeah, and I think that alignment with this kind of really basic understanding of zero-sum game, you can talk about distributive bargaining and all sorts of things, but basically the best described in kind of zero-sum game thinking. His understanding of that, he is a real estate mogul that thinks he can apply those kind of, this is how I would do a deal, bullying a deal in New York over this and that. And he applies that to international politics. I mean, you read someone like Madeleine Albright's book, Fascism. She talks about that as a section on Trump, talk about his foreign policy. He just doesn't understand alliances because he thinks completely in zero-sum games, which is why he doesn't like the EU, et cetera, doesn't like NATO, because that's positive some game thinking. So he just applies his desire to be like Putin, his understanding of business to international politics, and sees that I can make the most for me and for my empire, which is the United States, for my kind of real estate empire. I can achieve even more by thinking in the way that Putin does, and no one will be able to stand up for me, and I will make America great again because my idea of great is this and that. And actually, if that means taking over Greenland and taking over Panama and taking over Canada as real estate that gives me access to these natural resources, then brilliant. And I'm going to be able to push the boundaries internationally speaking, because I've got the balls to do that. And he goes and does that, even if he knows that eventually it's not actually going to work out.
And a lot of people are transactional in business because that's what you have to do. But in different business sectors, you might be transactional over a period of a year or 2 years or 5 years. It depends on the sector you're in. You know, if you're a communications company building high-tech communications equipment, then you might work on a sort of 3 to 5 year cycle or more. And not for R&D, that's sort of different. If you're pharmaceuticals, you're going to be working on a sort of, 10, 20 year cycle as you work your business model through. If you're in retail, then it's going to be, from sale to sale, season to season. You're going to be looking at it at the most, probably quarterly or annually. And that's why those sales figures are so good. He seems to have an almost instantaneous version of transactionality. He does not think in these long-term
100%.
Investment ways.
Okay.
So NATO is an investment, which he doesn't understand.
Yeah, so you're that instant transactional kind of thing, whichever. So I have this zigzag theory, and so far he's only zigged. He hasn't zagged. He has the capacity to zag, but he doesn't have like a Obama had a compass that always pointed left. Bush would have had one that pointed right. So it's not the same thing. But so he can do this and can do that, but he just keeps going toward Russia, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But there is one facet of him that I've observed that seems remarkably consistent, and that is that he has this sheep and goats kind of view of the world of kings and killers on one side and everybody else over here. And I think that's playing into the way that he's operating. But Greg hasn't spoken yet, so let's bring him.
Well, thank you. It's pretty simple for me. I don't even have to really think on a geopolitical scale. I think more on an ideological scale, because the narratives is what I listen to. The narratives, the action will follow. But if you are out there today and you do not think that at least at the minimum, the narrative of Donald Trump is not a mimic of Vladimir Putin, then we can sit down and maybe make bullet points and I can show it to you. So we have an ideological narrative of admiration that you can't deny that. We have the president of the United States, the most powerful position in the world, openly stating multiple times that Vladimir Putin is his friend and Xi Jinping is his friend and Kim Jong-un is his friend. And the narrative had to change from the dictator of Zelensky to the president who didn't own a suit. So you can see the ideology is there. Now put yourself in a Ukrainian person's position. Their children, their fathers, their uncles, their aunts have been killed by North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region. And Donald Trump says Kim Jong-un is my friend. He's loading rail cars full of weapons to destroy Ukrainians, and there's no other reason. Coming out even within the last 48 hours saying my allegiance to Putin, my allegiance to Russia is strong, it's unwavering, and we will continue until victory. You then have the evil empire of Russia that has been documented and stated decade after decade after decade. So if your narrative is that's my friend, then we're already starting from and I don't want to use this word incorrectly, but a compromised position as a global leader. That is not how you communicate on the global stage if you are the alpha male. So we know right now that Vladimir Putin, without question, is the alpha. You can see it in Donald Trump's eyes. You can see the gaga goo goo. Prof, you are the one that brought out When a Man Loves a Woman. And that is exactly the lyrics that we are seeing unfold. Then you take it to the next step. When did it become American policy that we demean other nations? When did it become an American policy, regardless of viewpoints, that we do not care if the Europeans are screaming? I am quoting right now. We don't care about their opinion. We don't care about anybody's opinion. Greenland, we're going to get you one way or the other, quote from presidential joint, the speech to the joint session of Congress. Canada is the 51st state, and we troll our good neighbor to the north. We troll them. I'm sorry, I can keep going with 50 more line items. So that's what I don't understand.
Okay, so what you just said has triggered a couple of thoughts. One, okay, you're Putin, and like he's let's just follow your line of thinking. Trump, you're the president of the United States, and you wish you were Putin, but Putin's got like a GDP the size of Texas. Like, I don't understand why the president, you could be Chester Arthur, like one of the like lamest presidents that we've ever had, and still be cooler than that, right? Just because you're the president of the US at that time when Chester Arthur was the president. Okay. So why he would think that Putin is something to be emulated?
It's about narcissism and it's about personality. And Trump is like, if you understand that Trump is a bully, he just is a bully. Then he would be the bully at school, right? That is what he's doing now. So all of what he's doing with Europe is bullying, with Canada is bullying, with Denmark is bullying. It's just like, I have the stronger position, and it's rather like his own life. He was dealt a good hand. Like, his father gave him $140 million when he died, or whatever, however much it was, right? So he gets to be in a powerful position and be able to bully other people, like economically and in the business world. That's how he approaches global politics, which is the US is the most powerful nation on earth. And so I'm going to flex, and I can flex because I'm the freaking president of this country, and I want to embody even more power in myself by getting rid of these guardrails, etc., etc. I'm going to appeal to all these strong men leaders, and we're all going to be strong men leaders together. And
to what end? Like, what's he going to do?
Legacy.
Here we go. I'm going to throw this out here, and you're not going to like it, or you may agree. People say, look, what we voted here is someone who understands how to run a business. Well, that's highly questionable, but at least his marketing business, turned over a reasonable income. He acts as a CEO. So what people are saying is, great, we've elected a CEO to head of state. You're not a CEO when you become head of state. You become a king. And if you combine that with bullying behavior, you become a tyrant or a dictator. What you guys have is a king, and convinced yourselves that he's a businessman, that he's this, that he's that. He's a king and is on the route to being a tyrant. Now, Ukraine had multiple revolutions for less than he's doing. Far less than he's doing. He's dismantling your economy. He's dismantling the concept of governance. He's dismantling American soft power. He's started on the judiciary. He's started with the labor camps, those films of, brown people with tattoos being sort of led away, humiliated. He is going to be deconstructing federal law. He may even start his own private army. You have a tyrant, and yet so many people that I'm in the struggle with will not accept that. Will say, okay, that could never happen in America because we have checks and balances, because we have a constitution, because he's deconstructing these things one by one by one. And there's far less resistance to it, it seems to me, in the US than there is in Serbia, than there is in Ukraine, than there is in so many places. And that's because this process of left to right, that process of this extreme kind of tribalism, this extreme brainwashing, this extreme sort of division of the media into leftist media, right media, etc. It's been taking place for decades and creating this environment now where people cannot see the wood for the trees. But sorry, guys, you have a tyrant, and the NRA just, forgot that that the Second Amendment's there to prevent a tyrant coming to power. They just happen. That might come across as quite extreme here.
Your
your
description sounds discordant to my ears. I understand what you're saying. I thoroughly heard everything that you said, and yet I see it that he came to power because he came to power on a wave of very angry people. You see the same populism across Europe as well.
But you're making a mistake there. You're connecting.
What am I missing?
You're connecting an ideology that isn't there, right? So he doesn't care what those people think, right? He will use what those people think in order to achieve power and sustain that power, right? But what a really good observation about him was from a guy who wrote a book on him.
Use resentment. All tyrants tap into resentment.
Populism. That's populism.
Populism.
Well, I mean, so do many politicians that aren't tyrants. So I'm not people will think I'm defending Trump. I'm not. I'm trying to understand what is actually happening here. That's why I'm asking these questions and trying to hear this. So go ahead.
So let me just interject here, and then because on the left, you two Jonathans, I'm concurring with you completely. Not in every facet, but the narrative there. So I'm trying to just look at the big picture. Let me tell you a real life example, and then the Jonathans can interject here. I think this is a little bit of what you're saying. I'm at my daughter's volleyball game last night at a high school in Western Pennsylvania, very rural, even though it's in the north, it would be very Southern atmosphere, very Bible belty, you name it. And I'm there. And this is an away game, and a person walks up to me, okay? An American, classic, conservative, Christian, right American, walks up to me, recognizes me outside of the volleyball court. He says, "Greg, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "I watch your podcast." I said, "Well, thank you." He goes, "What has happened to my country? I feel it is hijacked. This is not my America. This is a 60-year-old white, conservative, Republican, Christian. Who is this leading our country? I see you beginning to be a little more aggressive going against that, and I appreciate it. You're stating what I want to say because I don't recognize my country anymore." And that's just, I think that's some of what you're saying over there, Jonathan and Jonathan. It's ideologically, like for me, I have no idea what is happening in I'm shocked. I'm just shocked.
So what I was going to say, there's a
I
guy
have
called
to jump off, Jonathan, because I got this really bad cold, which is messing with me. So I was back to this, well, with The Apprentice. This is a perfect image because rather than as happens in a lot of left-leaning, we're desperate to sort of pin this label of agent or asset of the Kremlin. And I don't think actually that's helpful anymore. I think Trump is Putin's apprentice.
So what I was going to say is that Raman Saturday wrote a book, The Apprentice in Wonderland, I think it is. And he, fascinating when you see him interviewed. And he did all this research on him, spoke to Trump and blah, blah, blah. It's apparently a well-researched book. But his observation was that Trump was more proud of being on The Apprentice than he was of being the president of the United States in his first term. And this gives you a really good insight, which is why that article says The Apprentice is a skeleton key to understanding Trump. Right, if you understand his position of being given this throne, having this fake boardroom that was created for him because his own one was too crappy, and they created this persona of the apprentice of this amazing businessman that he wasn't, but they created this persona. If you listen to the NBC producer of the show The Apprentice, he will tell you we created Trump. He feels responsible for having created the beast that became the president, right? But in the book he says he's prouder of this role than being a president because that was a role where he literally got to fire people and do exactly what he wanted, and people were completely beholden to him in a way that in the first term of his presidency he was unable to do, because there were checks and balances in place and there was an establishment Republican Party that held him back. This time round, Trump 2.0 is a very different kettle of fish, right? So you've got no guardrails. The guardrails are being removed, and you don't have the establishment GOP. They've either completely capitulated to MAGA Trumpism, or they have become MAGA Trumpism. And he has this platform where he can do what he wants at the moment. He is literally removing all of the checks and balances to him gaining more and more power. Where you're talking the unified executive theory, combining the three aspects of government, and you've got Steve Bannon and people formally trying to get him to into a third term. So
I mean, they were talking about impeaching judges. I mean, Mr. Gerdes, at what point? Because this is interesting.
That's a legit question.
Yeah.
At what point do I see that he's a tyrant? Is where you're going? Yes, and in my mind, I was going exactly the reverse. Every side thinks the other side sucks. Right. So the liberals always think that the conservatives suck, vice versa. Okay, that's a normal, natural thing. But this seems like it's on steroids. Like this feels different somehow. And I'm not sure exactly where that is. I just don't see the tyranny. I see terrible statements. I see conduct that's unbecoming in many ways. I just don't see.
Don't wait till you're in prison to see tyranny, right? Tyranny you have to get there first, right?
And well, I understand.
So all of those steps towards tyranny.
So right? Are you projecting or am I? I mean, that's what. So let me give you an example. Greenland. Do you really think that Trump is going to try to take over Greenland or Canada? I mean, in your heart of hearts, do you believe that that's a thing?
It could happen. Yes, depends
really?
How far he goes, to how let's see. It depends how little resistance he gets. This is the key.
He is using economic coercion already. So he's already invalidated. He's already invalidated Article 1 and Article 2 of NATO. So technically, we could go to war with the United States on behalf of Canada, because if you go and read the NATO treaty, read Articles 1 and 2, he has already used economic coercion on a NATO ally, right?
So, but also the head of state of Canada is the king of Britain. So
one of my viewers just said,
little detail there, right?
One of my viewers just said, I need to read media outside the U.S. Okay, I think I'm there. I'm looking at him and going, okay, I think he's trying to get something out of this. This is a terrible way of going about this, but I just don't see any possibility that he would be trying to take Canada or
go Greenland. Mr. Fink. Go,
Let's
Mr.
listen
Fink.
to Ukraine. So they removed Yanukovych, and we all accept here that wasn't a CIA coup. What did Yanukovych did? He operated on behalf of a foreign power, Russia. He started dismantling the security apparatus and the army. He agreed to be part of the EU and then withdrew and took that away. So he broke his electoral mandate. He kind of went a little bit further and started locking people up and shooting them. And many other things, corrupted judiciary and so on and so on and so on. He also introduced an extreme oligarchy, or at least it was already there, but he entrenched an extreme oligarchy, again, in Russia's favor. We already have a number of these things tick in the box. The US is withdrawing from historic alliances such as NATO. It is threatening or making coercive moves against allies. There was the threat last week to impeach judges. We have Elon Musk, an extreme oligarch, plus a bunch of tech bros, carving up the economy to their favor. So we haven't ticked all the boxes yet, but it comes to the point where I say, this is the point at which Ukraine had a revolution, which we think was justified.
Okay. I understand. So when Biden was talking about packing the Supreme Court, I heard this as that's not going to happen. And I hear a lot of what Trump is doing as that's not going to happen because there's overblown political rhetoric. And I am actually listening to stuff like this is Malcolm Nance's book, right? I am actually working through, like trying to understand all sides as much as possible. I can't see that we're to the point that where you two must not be getting any sleep at night. because if I saw this the way that you two do, I wouldn't be
Oh, yeah.
getting any sleep at
I
night.
haven't
But
been
I would-
sleeping too well. No.
Yeah, I would say that there's a false equivalence between packing the Supreme Court, which is,
Of course you would,
effective.
because that's that's the left side, and the
But
right
it's not.
side sees
So
the left
Trump's-
side as far
but-
worse, and vice versa.
But
But
Trump's
that's
already packed the court.
constitutional.
Like I
mean,
don't,
it's
I don't.
reprehensible, but it's
that's
using
within-
constitutionally sanctioned
Exactly,
methods.
exactly. So this is like if
Whereas
you're
impeaching a
comparing.
judge is not constitutional, as far as I can tell.
Well, no, it's not left
Oh.
and right. It's actually originalist versus those with a more open interpretation. So I wouldn't say the court is packed in that sense.
Yeah.
Originalists are trying to follow very narrowly what was there. So it's a little bit different with the court, but nonetheless, so I discount so much of what is said by politicians that maybe that's why I come
But
to
that's
it this
dangerous.
way.
No, this
Well,
I have
no,
a
I
real problem
agree.
with this.
We have
I
to
have
have
a-
a bingo card, right? We have to have a bingo card on both sides. On one side, it's what do they say and what boxes do they tick, and then the other side is what do they do.
Now, that's what I
Because what they-
look at a lot more.
What
What's
they say
actually
should
done.
alarm us, right? That should
Now-
get our hackles up. But when you go to the side of the bingo card where they start, doing X, Y, and Z, there has to come a point where you're like, do you know what? This has reached a threshold where
And
this
for
is
that reason, I
no
think
longer
Doge is
constitutional.
problematic. Right?
So I find this a real problem that we discount words and only talk. So many people say, don't listen to what Trump says, look at what he does, as if what he says doesn't have tangible impact, right? So when you've got people in Canada like now boycotting American goods, now buying guns, literally going out and buying guns because of the stuff that Trump is saying, then actually words matter. Right, there is a whole bunch of stuff that he is saying that then also gives his supporters ammunition themselves to have. So, for example, when he comes out and says CNN and MSNBC are corrupt and illegal, and then he says later, I think they're going to be turned off, right? We just go, oh, it's just words. And if we keep saying, oh, it's just words, we are the frogs boiling in the water, because at some point they do end up happening. Like Trump has joked about a good many things that have now happened, right? And so we are, I think, unwise to just go, oh, we shouldn't listen to what he says. We should only look at what he does, because I think there is a connection between words and action. And I think those words also have tangible effects just in and of themselves.
Taking
We're less
Trump
than 3 months in,
Taking Trump literally is like listening to a 3-year-old and then like being shaped by that. I mean, that's because he's all over the map. So I'm
but it's
I'm more
not just-
skeptical than maybe you guys
Okay,
are. But
let me jump in here then. If I agree with Professor Gertis on this statement, taking Donald Trump literally is like
It's a fool's
acting like a
errand.
3-year-old. I completely concur with that. But
he shouldn't
I
say
am-
those things. Let's say let me
Okay,
go out there. He shouldn't say those
Okay,
things.
I
He's
agree.
creating
I agree
disruption.
he shouldn't say
Canada-
those things.
Yeah.
I agree he shouldn't say those things. But let's go facts only here. The definition of tyrant is a cruel and oppressive ruler. That's the definition. Webster's. Okay. We are seeing cruel behavior from Donald Trump. It is not just words. He was cruel to Volodymyr Zelensky. He is cruel in the way he is deporting illegal. I'm for border control 100%. I'm for proper immigration. But even if we go to the Christian argument, Professor Gertis, and you and I close the doors right now, a lot of the revival fires that are running throughout America, as we would call it, I know the guys on the left are clueless about what I'm talking about, are in these immigrants that are here trying to make a better life. I know it's a completely different topic, but the behavior is there. Let's quote what he said about the Atlantic on the security debacle that included our national security director and our Department of Defense putting out plans about the Houthis. And whether it was detailed or not, it's irrelevant. What did Trump say? I didn't even know about it. And secondly, which is a lie. And secondly, what he said was, oh, that was in the Atlantic. Well, they'll be out of business soon. That's the problem.
Yeah,
And
I showed the same thing. I
but
get it.
that's the problem.
Doge
Okay.
as well. I mean, look at the
Forget-
operation of Doge. It's because you could say that, okay, the central government is overblown, a lot of programs can't be justified. the way it has been transacted, the way the cuts of Doge have been implemented are with extreme prejudice, extreme cruelty, and they're not replacing what they're destroying with anything constructive. They're literally arsonists to good governance. That is a form of administrative cruelty, and cruelty to all those people who lose their jobs literally with just a couple of weeks notice after.
So I was
decades
agreeing
of
that Doge is
service.
terrible in the way that it's going about doing things. Nobody, no doubt. And I'm not apologizing for Trump or trying to defend him. I'm trying to understand what he's doing. But I think maybe I'm not far enough in my view of him, and I think you guys might be too far. I'm just trying to find out where the actual place is where we're seeing clearly.
So I'm still perturbed about about when we talk about what he says, right? It's not whether you believe what he says or not. That's kind of irrelevant, right? As an individual, right? Or whether I believe that he's going to invade Canada or not. But if there's a great, or that's probably a bad example, something like CNN and then MSNBC, if you're going to continually talk about them being corrupt and illegal and then going to be turned off, then you are giving, and you have a very cultish base who are much more likely to take on board everything you say as being true. Then you are moving the Overton window. You're saying it's then acceptable to do things like this in a way that would have been completely unacceptable to say in public as a president previously. And then you are normalizing very extreme measures that then when these things do come about, because you've laid the groundwork with all your extreme rhetoric, it becomes far more acceptable. So I think, we should not ignore what he says, not because we may believe it or not, but his followers often do believe it, and then because they hear something he says, they then have to post hoc rationalize that, and then they end up, because he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they'll still vote for him. They will, through cognitive dissonance reduction, just rationalize that that's a good and right thing to do, and then you've just got permission from your base to do these things.
I agree.
I
he
see
shouldn't
Doge
say
as tyrannical. I actually see it on the side of tyrannical, because the way it's been implemented drives a coach and horses through data policies, through not just good governance, but it seems from what I've been reading, the sort of numerous constitutional points have been violated, and there will be numerous court cases that challenge it, but it'll be too late by then. So you've got that despotic, capricious way of behaving. You also have extreme cruelty, and we give numerous examples, but those programs of US aid supported, let's say, vaccination programs in the third world and so on. Now, those programs could be handed off to other people. They could be sort of, tapered down, etc. No, they would completely just shut down overnight, which will result in tens of thousands of excess deaths. I'm speaking to someone today who detailed what the consequences of shutting Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe are.
Terrible. I agree. Look, I agree with these things. I agree he shouldn't do this. I agree he shouldn't talk like this. No doubt about it.
Partly
but the conclusion that you
despotic.
get to, I don't get to it. So here's the way that I view him. Like Putin made a lot of sense when I started thinking of him as a mafia boss, right? That's how I frame, like, that analogy is. So I see Trump, we go back to The Apprentice, like he's still thinking like The Apprentice. He still says things for effect, for ratings, for getting people's, off kilter, for grabbing the agenda, and so I see him doing these things in order for the attention economy. So that's how I read him. And because I read him that way, I'm not quite where you are.
It's not mutually
trying to make it about him.
There are guys behind him now. Unlike the first term, as Jonathan said, there is now a semi-coherent ideology behind it. He's doing all this stuff. He's doing, as you say, the big marketing theater up front, which he's kind of good at, creating noise, creating headlines, testing ideas. There are people behind him who are quite willing to actually implement it. I think that's the big difference. It's not
Trump
just
isn't smart.
The big theatrical show. There's an infrastructure behind him.
he's not a clever man, Trump, in terms of like having deep. He's not playing 5D chess, right? But he has now a group of people behind him who are very happy to see him as a dictatorial leader that they can manipulate from within that circle. So the Project 2025 lot, Paul Dans, I know he's not so much to do with it anymore, but Vought and these others who are really the architects of what I think is very dangerous ideology are able to puppet on a string this man into saying all these things, and he's happy to say that because it brings him more power. That power that he gets, that extra power he gets, allows them to fulfill their ideological dreams. And when you start seeing the Associated Press being banned from here and banned for that because they don't say the words Gulf of America, you're thinking, well, that sounds petty, but actually that's against the First Amendment, right? You're starting to see an erosion of the Constitution. You're starting to see erosion of these checks and balances. You've got to remember that the people that hold him to account are the mainstream media. And if you start removing mainstream media and then replacing them with your own obsequious media who will gesticulate, who will genuflect to you, who will get on their knees for you at any conceivable opportunity, then you are removing checks and balances. These are all I'd say very quick moves to erode any checks and balances for him becoming an autocrat. And I think he's on the way.
Yeah. And my last phrase, because I have to jump off because my cold's getting the better of me. He's not just testing messages to see what works. He's not just testing messages to see which gets the biggest headlines. He's testing message to see what gets pushback internally and externally. And if he doesn't get pushback, if his team behind him feel that certain things they can get away with, and they already have started doing this, then they're pushing the envelope. They're pushing the envelope. Certain things they may sort of put it out there, and okay, they get some pushback from allies. They get this, that, and the other. And there's some barriers and guardrails, and they're like, okay, we'll move on to the next lunacy. But they are testing not just to gain headlines, but to what they can actually get away with. And we're only 3 months in, remember, and he's already on the way to deconstructing NATO. He's on the way to starting a global trade war. He's on the way to letting Russia off the hook, and there'll be no sense of justice and complete impunity for the world's autocrats. We're 3 months in, and as you say, it's moving fast. And with that, I'm going to leave the stream on so my audience can benefit from it, but I'm going to bow out disgracefully.
Well, good to see you,
Mr.
Jonathan.
Fink.
Get better.
Absolutely. Can we? I'm just going to rewind back to Ukraine. Just a few things I wanted to say that I was going to bring up previously. Just a few of the analysts. Sorry to just completely jump to a different topic, if that's all right. Michael Weiss talking about how the maritime. Russia said the maritime ceasefire would come into force only after the lifting of the sanctions restrictions on the Russian Agricultural Bank and other financial institutions involved in international trade of food, and only after they were reconnected to the SWIFT international payment system. The US will assist in restoring Russian agriculture and fertilizer exports to the global market, reducing the cost of maritime insurance and expanding access to ports and payment systems to conduct such transactions. So that's a Kremlin. And that would obviously be absolutely insanely good for Russia, right? Just money pours back into the coffers. Michael Weiss says it also hinges on the EU approval to reconnect the Russian Agricultural Bank to SWIFT. Looks like those freeloading Europeans are being asked to bail out the United States in its diplomatic capitulation to Russia. I thought that's a really interesting point. So, on the one hand, these guys are going to slag Europe off, but actually Europe arguably holds some keys to those sanctions being lifted. And if this isn't being done with the say-so of Europe, then the US might have a problem in being able to fulfill Russia's asks there. Oliver Carroll says feels a bit like a mugging. The talks were trailed as technical, agreeing no strike list of infrastructure targets. In the end, seasoned Russian negotiators spent 12 hours wearing the Americans down. Sanctions relief at the minimum. Who knows what else was agreed? And then Oliver Carroll says, been speaking with the senior Ukrainian government source, re the skewed negotiations. He called it a deliberate humiliation by Putin. Quote, Trump needed an info win from the ceasefire deal, but Russia undercut his success, demanding sanctions relief. Alpha male isn't Trump. They're saying it's Putin. And then the final one, and you can react to all of these. Big thing to watch is whether the Black Sea Fleet is allowed to return to in full to Sevastopol. Ukraine expended a lot of resources driving them out. A return pegged to a ceasefire underwrites more military occupation of sovereign Ukraine. And I don't see it anywhere suggested that Ukraine gets to deploy its forces and assets where they currently are not. Although you could argue that stipulation that they remain in Eastern Black Sea might stop them from going to Sevastopol. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, that's why they called it the Eastern Black Sea, to keep them out of Sevastopol. I can tell you that, number one. But listen, I so want to go back to that former conversation and pull feet back in
we
here.
can't. But, let's go.
We don't have to. But I will say this. Let's just put proof in the proofs in the pudding. Krvoy Rig right now, the attack just finished, and it was massive. There are multiple hits, not airity, and massive fires burning. So I don't see how anybody can look at this logically. And I know they're going to get down to the nitty gritty of it with the infrastructure versus non-infrastructure, but it's not possible in reality if you are striking these urban centers and urban cities in Ukraine that you will not affect the infrastructure and the power grid. It's not possible. So Krvoy Rig, Mykolaiv both have underwent within the last hour massive attacks. Yeah.
I suppose the question to my mind is, why does it matter? Like, it's not going to last. Even if there was something that was, well, it's just the Eastern, it's not going to last. I just don't see how it's going to last.
Okay, so let's go back to the conversation we were having, and that is this. And you and I play devil's advocate off each other almost every day, Prof, and you help me and I try to help you, and we learn from each other. Why does the American administration say we've made good progress today? Because you haven't made good progress today. They need to make a deal, because now they need to make a deal more than either Russia or Ukraine needs to make a deal, because the great deal maker is going to make a great deal. And so, and that's the first thing about negotiation 101. You don't do that. You don't put yourself in a place where you need it more than the other side. It's kind of silly. Correct.
So,
well, let me.
I can't believe how. Sorry, Greg. I can't believe how naive the American negotiating team is, and I just think that talks
that's right.
that talks to how much they actually aren't negotiating for Ukraine. Or they just, what their intention is, a quick end to this. And so if they have to give half of Ukraine away to Russia, so be it. They don't care. But Trump doesn't care for the outcome of Ukraine. These guys don't care for the outcome of Ukraine. So let's get it done, and let's get trade back on the cards.
This was my original question about Trump. Is he really that naive? Like, is he a plant, or is he on the take, or what? Or is he just that naive? Like, at what point? This is how I framed that first question. At what point does it, like, he see that the woman's not good for him, and if he's bad, he can't see her? Like, at what point?
So he is definitely naive, and he's definitely ignorant, and I don't mean that in this pejorative sense, like, well, yeah, but like, he literally doesn't know the requisite stuff, right? So he is technically ignorant of where these places are in Ukraine, what Ukraine looks like. He thinks it's all rubble, and etc. So he's like technically ignorant, but he genuinely thought he could solve this within 24 hours. I believe that bravado in him. So he came thinking that was going to happen. Then he understood it was far more complicated, and he came out and said it's way more complicated than I thought. And he's being consistently frustrated by the complexities of it.
Isn't that assuming that you take him literally?
He took himself literally.
No. What I'm saying is, you think he genuinely believed that he could finish it in 24 hours. I'm saying nobody believed that. Even he, nobody I know believed that he actually believed that. He just says stuff like that. Go ahead.
No, I think he
with that, let's just call facts the way they are. I like facts. So Trump did come out just within the last 3 or 4 weeks ago and say, yeah, okay, I was being a little bit facetious about that 24-hour thing, and they were backing up on him. Okay.
Yeah.
So he called it. You're right. He'll say that as shock value. I completely agree with Professor Gerdes.
I don't believe that that's his excuse. He said he was being sarcastic.
Well, that can be an excuse.
I don't think he was.
Okay, fair enough. But regardless of naive or ignorant, whatever terms we want to use, I think it's completely different, and we're missing the ball completely here. He's careless.
Right?
He's careless. He's careless about the suffering of people.
Yeah.
He's careless about the suffering of Ukraine. It was validated when
careless, like sloppy, or careless, like heartless.
heartless,
So-
Okay,
careless
gotcha.
about the true suffering of Ukraine and others, to the point. I mean, we're going to build, and I know it's rhetoric, but we're going to build a new Monaco or a new Vegas in Gaza. And Zelensky wanted to show him a couple of pictures of the reality.
So
But
do you
it's,
believe he even meant that?
Yes. So
Really?
he if you're talking about Gaza, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
You really think he was
Like,
going to set up a new Vegas?
He's a real estate mogul. He's like he literally, and then he got frustrated because he thought that he'd get the buy-in from these other countries, and they immediately said no, actually we're not going to do that. And then he had to quieten down. So what happens? He consistently says these things, and then people have to correct him. So what happened in the first administration is he got corrected by establishment people around him, so that actually, and they had to do this all the time. And they had to bring him back in. Like, you listen to Fiona Hill. She says, like, he was just so unprepared going into these meetings, blah, blah, blah. He honestly, he believes he's going to do these things because he thinks in these bombastic ways. And he says, well, let's turn this into a Riviera, until people go around him and say, mate, well, they have to do it in a nice way, but like, it's never going to happen. But
don't you
he
think
thinks it can happen?
But don't you think he just what he does is say a bunch of things that are just absurd, and this is huge, this is the best, this is whatever, and maybe something will stick, is the way he kind of works things. And if it doesn't stick, no worries, I wasn't going to do that anyway, and he moves on.
You need to understand. So if you don't think
Greg is out here. Hold on.
I was just going to go ahead, JP. I won't forget my thought.
It's just a lot. Yeah, the last point, but not last point. But in order to understand his beliefs on Gaza, you need to understand where it came from, which is Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who had touted a similar thing years before. Right? He's 100% serious about that because it was a germinated seed of Jared Kushner, who is your real estate investor, blah blah blah, talking about doing exactly that previously. So yeah, 100% he was intending to do that.
Somebody just said, stop giving Trump the benefit of the doubt. I'm not. I'm saying he doesn't even believe what he's saying.
He does.
That's not giving somebody the.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And you and I are in the same vein. We 99%. But what he is saying is having massive effect. And that's
absolutely
of what we're missing here. It's having massive effect. And then when you put a little bit of action on it, just a little bit of action. For example, why is J.D. Vance's wife arriving in Greenland? It's just enough action to spur it on. So if you make that rhetoric, but you don't mean it, stop following through with actions. Where is Marco Rubio, the stinking Secretary of State of the United States? He has disappeared. Why is Witkoff, an oligarch billionaire, sitting around the table negotiating with Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and he doesn't even know the names of the regions of Ukraine? This is why I say the Trump administration and his rogue of cronies and oligarchs are careless. Elon Musk is careless about the world. I don't care about Starlink. I don't care about SpaceX, and I don't care about Mars. He's careless about humanity. Mm-hmm. It is obvious in his rhetoric on Twitter. I'm talking Elon Musk right now, and I'm telling you, Witkoff is careless. He has no reality whatsoever. And we have even an astronaut senator go to Ukraine a few weeks ago and say, you guys don't get it. It's terrible here. And Elon Musk calls him a traitor. Look it up. We have a complete
we talked about that.
Yes, a complete loss of reality. This is 2025. As much as I hate it, it's not 1985. It's not 1965. And I think sometimes we get stuck. I know I do. I personally get stuck in my growing up in Reagan and watching Red Dawn and learning about the Soviet Union and all of that, and hoping that 2025 is the same as 1985 and Reagan's going to stand up and say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, and then we're going to see all these things happening. Those days are gone. We live in a completely different era. And one of the main reasons that the era is different, and I'll get off my soapbox, is because this is the era of social media. This is the era of instant gratification. This is the era of artificial intelligence. This is the era of you don't know what to believe, when to believe it, who to believe. But there's one thing we can believe. Ukraine is being wiped off the planet right now, step by step. And there was an agreement made today that the Trump administration, at the bare minimum, was pleasant, about and say, hey, we made some good progress today. Russia, good progress. Everybody making good progress. And right now, cities are being smashed. That's it.
No doubt.
Different world.
Greg, you're upset like we're saying anything contrary to you. We're not.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying we're in a completely, and I'm
just saying I can't
you.
make sense of the guy.
That's
it. He doesn't even believe the things that he says, and then we're trying to make sense of him like he does.
But I think he often does, right? He will contradict himself. He'll say all sorts of things.
All the time he'll contradict himself.
But an awful lot of the time, he's deadly serious. So you go and look at that Gaza thing, and you look at all the articles that are discussing how feasible that is. Like, it wasn't something he just threw up. This is something that his son-in-law had touted. He then builds on it, gets this idea, and then goes bombastic with it. But then people around him have to react, and then they're all scrabbling. Oh my goodness!
Right. And then what happens?
Pushing the envelope all the time to see what he can achieve.
What's happened since then? Nothing.
Yeah. So then what happens is people. Yeah. Why? Because it's completely unworkable.
Because he just throwing stuff up against the wall.
Yeah, but he actually believes it could work, right? That wasn't throwing something at the wall like, oh, I'm going to go to space in 2 days, and all these nonsense things. That's something that if people went, oh, right, yeah, let's do that, and then made it work, he'd be like, I told you.
Right. You're right. He would take the credit.
Work.
But I'm saying he believes that like maybe 2% of the things that he throws out are going to possibly work, but something's going to stick.
Pause.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let's go with that argument right there.
Yeah,
2% will stick.
Can you buy that theory, John?
Absolutely, I can.
Okay.
I mean, I personally think he thinks an awful lot more is going to stick, but he says so many things that it doesn't matter.
He does say so many things. He's all over the freaking map.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But listen, can somebody tell me? I don't want to talk about internal American politics. I only want to talk about foreign relations.
Yeah.
Can anybody tell me anything good he's thrown to the wall?
No, I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just
I know you're not. That's what I'm trying to help you out here.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand you. So I'm on Johnny's side. I completely understand you because we see things the same. But in the foreign world, he's throwing so much out there. And even if 2% sticks, that 2% is going to be disastrous.
I'm saying all I'm saying is he throws this out because he has no ideological core that's going to shape us this way or shape us that way. And that's why the man loves a woman thing about Putin is so weird, because it's about the only thing that continues to be consistent.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. Like, I think he is ideologically vacuous, but he has people around him who are not, and therefore, when he is hell bent on power, then that facilitates them being able to realize their ideology. And so he says things like, he says big things that he believes that are to do with personality and to do with bravado and fighting talk, right? Where he'll say, I'm gonna solve this war within 24 hours, just you wait and see. And Gaza can be a Riviera. Like, that's not complicated. None of it is complicated. None of it is based on like granular knowledge of these situations. It's really big bombastic claims that are overly simplistic, but he genuinely believes it because that is him. He's this bombastic guy. He's the apprentice, the guy in charge of the CEO that can do anything and says anything. What I say goes. And if I say you're going to do that, you're going to go and do that. And if I say we're going to turn Gaza into a Riviera, you guys are going to go and bloody sort that out. But the problem is he's taking that thought from the boardroom. This is kind of what I was saying earlier. He's taking that from a New York boardroom, right? And applying it to global geopolitics, where you can't do that to Gaza because you know what? Saudi Arabia and freaking Jordan and Israel themselves are like, that ain't going to happen. So like,
yeah, that's right.
He doesn't know enough about that stuff to veto
totally
himself.
agree that it was never going to happen, right? And that he shouldn't be creating these waves, but he does because he thinks that he's capturing. My view is that he thinks he's capturing the spotlight, capturing the narrative. Everybody's talking about him, whatever it is. But I don't think he really thinks that it's actually going to work most of the time. But if it does, it's fortuitous, and I have made a big deal. So I just process differently with this, and I don't think it's a good way of processing. I don't think what he's doing is a good way of going about doing it, but that's how I read what he's actually doing. Now, the question is, where are the big boys, that like the real politicians that have been there? Like Rubio has been such a disappointment. Where are you? Like you
Okay,
should have
I
been.
can answer that.
Go ahead.
I can
Well, if you're
answer
gonna
that
get
easily.
primaried,
I can answer that easily. Because Russia has prepared for this for decades and decades. I will never stop shouting that from the rooftops. America and the rest of the world have been caught with their pants down at different levels of understanding of what Russia has truly been doing decade over decade over decade. You have two key players that have now disappeared from the scene. Number one is Keith Kellogg, the 80-year-old general that was appointed as the envoy, who speaks Russian and was kicked out of the initial meetings in Moscow with the agreement of the office of Donald Trump, who was given a different position to go be the rep and go chat with Zelensky. Whose request was that? That was Russia's request.
Yeah, and then they honored it.
Why has Marco Rubio disappeared? I would suggest that it goes back to the speech he made years ago, demolishing Russia and the communist narrative. And the Russians know that in the root of Rubio's heart, even though he is really touting a lot of MAGA narratives right now, but in the root of his heart, they have it indexed. And I'm not just making this crap up. They've got it indexed, they've got it filed, they've got it viewed. This guy is not completely sold out for the Ukrainian narrative. This guy has roots against us. Get him off the stage. And I really believe that they level the stage to the negotiations that they want. It goes right back to the example of what happened in Saudi Arabia over the last 24 hours. Ukraine had 3 hours, Russia had 12. I watched the video when the Russian negotiators came out. I literally watched them walk out in their 3 suits with their big vodka bellies, and they were getting ready to head and go, most likely hit a little bit of vodka because it's the culture. The Saudis came out behind them and they were walking on, and then the press corps got them together to take a picture. And you have to understand Russian culture at this point. I can look at their faces. I've worked in Russia since 1994. I can look at their faces, their mannerisms, the way they stood for their picture to stand in front of it. And this is what they said. Mission accomplished. Let's go back to Moscow. We're so woefully behind in the understanding of the Russian machine that has been built. And I'm not glorifying them. It's just reality. And yes, Johnny, that's the picture of Kravoy Rig right now.
Yeah,
I'm not glorifying them. I'm just telling you it's reality, guys.
Why Marco Rubio is doing what he's doing, and in fact, you can argue the same for probably Mike Walls and Keith Kellogg. They toe in the party line. It's because they are afraid to stand up to Trump and to stand up to the MAGA base. It's that simple. Like, they'll either get primaried if they are in an elected position, or if they're someone like so you know, there have been very public statements by Elon Musk and other billionaires and millionaires who have said, if you stand against what Trump is saying here, I will put money towards primarying you, which means you will lose your job eventually. And people don't want to lose their jobs. Now, if you look at the cabinet, there was some really disturbing cabinet footage when Elon Musk was talking in the cabinet, and they all were clapping along with everything Trump said. And it looked like Pyongyang. The whole cabinet meeting looked like it was Kim Jong-un saying something, and everyone was just obsequiously clapping. You have this, and this goes back to the Jonathan Fink's claim and mine that Trump is a tyrant. When you have behavior from people that there appears to be absolutely no one that is willing to say anything against Trump in any position of importance in the Republican Party, and pretty much right across the Republican Party. Now, you look at the Democrats, it's like herding cats. They're often infighting and always have done, blah, blah, blah. Because actually there isn't that kind of really officious authority structure. Now, what you have now in Trump 2.0 is, I would argue, a dictatorial authority structure that is, I think, empirically confirmed by the fact that no one is willing to actually stand up and say what they believe anymore. So you know damn well that Marco Rubio, because he said it before a hell of a lot, you know damn well that what he's saying now is not aligned to what he believes. Right, so you have people who are compromised in government in these cabinet positions who are 100% selling themselves out for their own self-preservation. And that's a pretty normal human
Let me
behavior.
make it this simple, and why I'm so adamant about that, and the Russian narrative and how much homework they've done. I can tell you point blank right now, we're talking about the envoy to Russia, Witkoff. We're talking about the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who in the past has definitely been anti-Russia. We're talking about Keith Kellogg, and that's the highest level people. The Secretary of State of the United States, one of the most powerful positions in the world. Okay, take all that off the table. My personal name and Zhenia's personal name are on a blacklisted index of enemies of the state of Russia because we do volunteer work and it is publicly known. We are on the index blacklisted enemies of the state. Point blank, it's in the list. We are nobody, man. We're nobody.
So was my website.
Okay, that's my point. We're nobody. Now, let's take it all the way to the Secretary of State of the United States and Keith Kellogg. But they are so intense on what is happening layer by layer by layer. You know, there is a reason that in general and historically, an overwhelming number of the greatest chess players ever are Russian. And now, of course, Indians have moved up and Chinese and Americans, but it was historically the Russian. Look it up, the FIDE ratings through the 40s and 50s and 60s. Then Bobby Fischer came and dethroned that. We know that whole era. Why do I say that? Because they do think ahead. They think ahead. I'm not sure we
certainly do. They do. No doubt. I don't know why we're even explaining that. I know that that's the case. I'm just trying to make sense of why Trump is the way that he is and beholden to Putin to try to figure out that piece of the puzzle. I understand the hierarchy, why people want to keep their jobs. I get all that. There's nothing really new about that.
Well,
but
then
this
we have
man
to
love
come
the woman
down.
thing, and I can't get, like, if you're the president of the United States, why Putin is that exciting? I just don't understand.
So it's narcissistic personality disorder, like 100%. That's what he has. I mean, all of his traits fit into that condition, as far as I understand. The kind of not to do any armchair diagnostics here, but also, as Vlad Vexler says, and we'll obviously go to Greg in a second. But Vlad Vexler talks about how there is an element of this called narcissistic submission, which is where the people you do submit to, or are these other big leaders who you really want to be like, but also when they give you praise, like Putin does very cleverly, gives Trump praise, then that is like worth 10 times the praise from your base, right? So if your other big idol guy that you want to be like, strong man, gives you praise, then that is like, so that is your narcissistic submission. So you submit to them in order to get that praise. That's just
I would make it even much more simple than that, guys, and with validation, with source and proof. Okay, it's easy. Donald Trump likes Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I just
it's his
can't
friend.
figure out for the life of me why that's so
he
sticky.
Likes him. I can't answer that. Nobody can. He likes him. We can then get into all the reasons why, but it's a fact. He likes him.
Sure.
And let's be honest, with the behavior that we've seen, he likes Putin better than Zelensky. That's obvious.
That's very clear as well.
Okay. Witkoff himself said on national television in the interview, I can pull the video right this second if we need it. I won't. He says, I like Putin. I have no reason to not believe him. Yeah. These guys.
And Witkoff reports directly to Trump, skipping Marco Rubio, and that's intentional.
100%.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting difference between Trump and Putin. So Trump is a narcissist. Putin is not. Putin is a sociopath. And some people analyze that the difference here is that Putin's happy to see himself look bad in certain situations in order to manipulate the other person to then come out ultimately on top. Whereas Trump can't think like that. So Trump thinks short term.
That's really helpful. That's actually more explanatory than much of what we talked about so far.
Yeah. So
really powerful.
Trump will never ever accept responsibility for anything that's been bad. Like that, so that's part of the condition. Like, and you tell me one time he's ever said sorry. He's ever said he's ever admitted that was a mistake. And this was something that the what's his name, Cohn, the lawyer that was he was a protege of the lawyer, the McCarthyist lawyer, that was a friend of the family's, and that was who helped bring up Trump when he was younger. And he taught him one thing. He said, never never admit it was your fault for anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Never say, never say you're sorry, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
So
Cohen.
Trump does that, but I think it also fits in with his personality disorder. But unfortunately, that means he's very easy to be manipulated by people like Putin, who can think in terms of chess, because they are, I think, just cleverer in these games. He's former KGB agent, right? And so he's going to be saying, right, I can submit to Trump, or I can show that Trump is stronger than me, maybe in some situations, or do this or do that, because ultimately I'm controlling him. And sociopathically, I am the one that's actually controlling this whole landscape there. So I think there are some interesting differences between them. But yeah, it's just my
that's interesting. I think that there's something explanatory to what you just said.
Agreed. Let me put these out there while you're thinking there.
Gonna wipe it
Vavon
out.
Putin has 90%. I saw that, JP. Just a couple more statements. Let's bring it back to Ukraine. Zelensky quote tonight: Ukraine considers the United States agreement to help Russia with access to its agricultural products and fertilizers on the world market as a relaxation of sanctions against the aggressor state. Quote Zelensky. Second quote from Zelensky tonight: the United States has offered Ukraine a new deal on fossil fuels, not signed. The nuclear power plant issues are not included in those negotiations. Now,
no, I did hear that earlier. Yeah.
So the nuclear power plant, as once again, we go back to the shock statements. Oh, they got nuclear power plant. They got land, all this stuff. So Zelensky making it clear. I would like to just, everyone listen to this. Give me 30 seconds and we'll get your replies on this. One of the best guys in Ukraine. So I try to provide the Ukrainian perspective on this and the Ukrainian view. I do work, all over the world, but most of my work's been in Ukraine and Russia. So I try to give globally that Ukrainian perspective. Sternenko, I trust this dude. I mean, he's unbelievable what he does. But this is his statement. And let's just see if you guys agree with this. Following Saudi Arabia, it appears only Ukraine made concessions. Number one, energy. When we began to actively destroy enemy infrastructure, in particular oil infrastructure, the Russians actually needed a truce because it becomes very painful. As long as the refineries were not burning, the Russians did not need a truce. That was his view. Secondly, the Black Sea. Sternenko says, Ukraine, we don't even have a naval fleet, and we dominate the Black Sea compared to a state that has one of the largest naval fleets in the world. This is purely unilateral gesture of goodwill on the part of Ukraine. The Russians have not made any concessions. They will, and this was prior to the attacks on Mykolaiv tonight and Kryvyi Rih, they will continue to attack us with missiles and drones, no less than before. The recent strikes on the residential buildings, medical centers in Odessa, Kyiv, Sumy, etc., are proof of this. In return for this, they, meaning Russia, receive a relaxation of sanctions on fertilizer and more freedom to sell grain from Ukraine. They demand now even more sanctions to be lifted in their recent reprisal, and there is no doubt that the states will lift them in the end. We get nothing from this deal. So in reality, now the Americans are saving the Russians, saving them from that agonizing defeat in the Black Sea, saving their refineries and other energy infrastructure, and as a bonus, continuing to lift sanctions now and more in the future so that Russians have more money for war. This is not a fair deal. This actually is untying the hands of the aggressor. Powerful, my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think yet again it appears that the US have just capitulated to Russia's demands, and that is to, unfortunately, the detriment of Ukraine. And as it was always going to be, or at least it seemed in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And as I said earlier, if Ukraine then fight against this, then it looks like they're fighting against what the US wants, and then it looks like that might be permission for the US to hit Ukraine with a stick.
I do have breaking news that Ukraine and Russia, and I'm a little tongue in cheek here, guys. So I know a lot of people are watching right now, a little tongue in cheek, but we actually have one thing that Russia and Ukraine have agreed upon today. One of the things that we have not talked about that I personally believe will become more front and center as we progress in this war. And we will see, we're already seeing the failure of these Saudi Arabian talks, and it will continue to play out. But one of the big things I encourage everybody to keep your eyes on is the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's going to become the epicenter of negotiations. It's going to become the epicenter of conversations. They've already started today. That is why Zelensky said, yeah, we've received another rare earth minerals deal, haven't signed it, and no, the nuclear power plant is not in it. So Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov today saying the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant today is a Russian nuclear facility. Transferring control over it to Ukraine or any other country is impossible. That also referring to the United States. He stated, Zaporizhia, the employees of that power plant are Russian citizens. NATO countries, intelligence services have sabotage potential. Therefore, it is impossible for representatives of any of these countries to temporarily access the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Additionally, joint operations of this station with any other state or nation is unacceptable. He then said, earlier, Trump spoke about the possibility of transferring the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to U.S. ownership and a partnership and control. Lavrov saying today, this will never happen. Zelensky responded tonight, transferring the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to the United States is impossible. On this, we agree with Russia. So that's it.
There you go.
So everybody watch this. You know, early in the war, we talked about it nonstop, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Then the war went on in the years 2 and 3. It's looking like we're going to come back around because, you know, I've been here. I've been to Energodar. This power plant is unbelievable in how big it is and how powerful it is. It sits there right on the Dnipro, below Zaporizhia, across what used to be the bay, or the river. It looks like a bay. But I think this is going to come right back around because they're starting to talk about it a lot more. When I say they, heads of state, Zelensky, Russia.
Question.
Yeah.
I've been talking the last couple of days about, well, okay, we're starting to see negotiations around the edges. But so, you know, Black Sea energy infrastructure, although Kryvyi being hit tonight, that's surely going to rile America. I reckon, you know, Trump's been previously annoyed when there are strikes after negotiations. So I wonder whether Russia will have done themselves a bit of a disservice, not disservice, but shot themselves in the foot. Anyway, you're going to imagine there's going to be a freezing of the front line at some point, or there's going to be demands for that to happen and talks about that, right? So both sides are surely going to want to throw as much as they can at the front lines. Now, it's looking like Russia has somewhat culminated along the front line, although they did move a lot of troops up to the Kursk area. And so those troops, I think, can be moved back down to the front line areas. So, and I think Ukraine's probably realizing that they're going to have to throw a lot at the front line. Possibly that's why we're seeing a number of places where today was the first time I've done my mapping update. I haven't released it yet. I thought I released it earlier, didn't press go. It's the first time for ages where I've got more blue pins on the map than pink pins or red pins. In other words, the Ukrainians made more gains today than the Russians did across the front line.
Yeah,
okay?
It's been a good week.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so, and you're wondering, are there troops in reserve? There are talks about increased activity along Dnipro, potential along Zaporizhia, potential for both sides along Zaporizhia, and then all the places where there is movement. So are the Ukrainians getting ready? Do you think, I expect particularly Greg here, do you think the Ukrainians are getting ready to try and push as much as possible in light of a potential freezing of the front lines, and what the capacities for Russia to do likewise?
I don't think they're going to push even with the thought of a freezing of the front lines. There's an awareness probably somewhere down deep in the back of their mind, but I guarantee you they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about winning the war. And if which it's not going to happen, but this energy infrastructure in the Black Sea ceasefire, if that was to hold, the front lines are still raging. And right now, you said it, we're getting more blue pins. I haven't spoken directly about the front lines, and I told Professor Curtis this a few days ago, because there's been so much back and forth movement. When I zoom in, I want to be extremely accurate, and it's been so good. But now we're actually getting some clarity that Ukraine is making some good movement there in certain areas on the front lines. You're right about the Kursk groupings probably will rotate down. We also have the back and forth of what's happening in the Belgorod region. I still not confident to talk about that enough yet, but for sure, Ukrainian soldiers have been on Russian soil, and for sure, Russian soldiers have been on Ukrainian soil in the Sumy region in different places. So we have a lot of back and forth going there. It'd be interesting to see. But I don't think, in fact, I know so much time spent with these soldiers, they don't think about freezing. They go do their job every day, and all they want to do is be supported and know that they're cared for and supplied, and they will go and do the job. It's like, Zelensky said so long ago, months and months and months ago, if you will just help us, we know how to beat Putin. Just help us beat Putin. We know how to do it. We understand him. We understand what Russia wants to do. So I don't think there's any thought in that. Last night, when these negotiations were going on, Professor Curtis and I were actually chatting back and forth a little bit, and or somebody, I think it was you, Prof. Moscow Times released, they were the first ones to come out with a statement, and I read it. It was late last night, East Coast time. It would have been early the morning in Moscow. And they actually stated that Russia still 100% was adamant that Ukraine remove all military from Zaporizhia, from Kherson, from Donetsk regions and Lugansk regions,
and that's
fully
never
withdraw.
going to happen.
So why freeze? Why worry about freezing the lines when you can just keep holding out for the maximum thing, because our Constitution doesn't allow us to give up any territory?
As you look at that line right there, correct. And as you look at that line right there, and I've discussed this with so many Ukrainians and soldiers and Zhenya and so many people. Okay, and Johnny, you realize that you've ridden a lot of this with us. Now, of course, the lines are much different than when you were out there with us, unfortunately. I don't even know how you freeze that, have a demarcation line. I mean, guys, we're talking about a massive front line. This is not a demilitarized border between North Korea and South Korea. And this is not some small piece of land near Kaliningrad. This is not 8 kilometers for Gaza. This is a massive front line with so much different terrain, different municipalities, little towns, ravines. I have no idea how you would even make a demarcation line on that. I don't even know how you would freeze it.
Yeah, going through the middle of towns and villages, and
literally this half of the East and West Berlin. I don't know how you even freeze it.
Something like the Dnipro River. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, you could imagine. Yeah, you draw a line along there, but everywhere else it gets a little bit funky.
Oh my gosh!
No, you can freeze it. It's just a matter of time until it gets unfrozen.
Well, that's
war
exactly
breaks
right.
out again, and that's precisely what the problem is here. So
that is.
I believe that the Trump administration is going to think in terms of freezing the line at some point, and not be concerned about that. It's going to kick back off again, and it will. I mean, there's no question about it, to my mind. And anyway,
I completely concur with that. I think, the Trump administration would consider that a win for everybody. We've frozen it. We've stopped the war. We've stopped the killing. Because that's the narrative that they continue to put out every day. So I'm sure they're going to push for that. But I according to Russia and Ukraine, that's not going to fly.
We went an hour longer than I thought we would.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what happens.
We also need to, there are lots of people who are giving super thanks and chats, and I feel many of them for all of our channels.
We need to go.
Gone through
please.
Yeah, I've gone through the memberships, but thank you very much. And I'm so sorry, but this will have to be really, really quick. But really do appreciate all of the
Jim Smith, Tarkov Gamer, yo, thank you.
Michael Future, thank you very much. Here's one from one of you guys, Slava Ukraini, dunk on you. The White House is full of compromised people. Absolutely 100%. Thank you so much. Petra Olsen, that's definitely for you, Greg.
That is the Swedish non-smoking initiative.
Absolutely. Dunk on you, super generous. Incredibly generous. Linda H for Sugar Cube Fund. And that's
thank you, Linda. We were giving sugar cubes. Well, Zhenya was giving sugar cubes away. He's just gotten back from the front lines.
Thank you, Mr. Lion Dust. Thank you very much, Richard Bennett. Awesome, Kevin Force. Thanks, matey. Thank you, Richard Demi. Super generous, Blonde Bombsheller, hanging out as well. Always good to see.
Best moderator team on the planet. Sorry, guys.
Johnny Nedregard, thank you very much.
Legion Island Dweller.
And Papa Dutch, Whitcoff is
legendary
definitely
redneck.
So for one of you, or maybe Jonathan Fink, I don't know, Jack Herrera, really
that was on
there.
my channel. Jack, thank you. I want to be hopeful that the U.S. is still on our side. The actual situation is a nightmare. Jack, that €100 there, thank you. But I think that is what we've articulated tonight with all of our different views and coming together. We're messed up. It's nightmarish. I agree.
Papa Dutch, thank you very much. Fox News is all foxed up.
I'm not sure, Papa Dutch. I think they're coyoted up. They're coyotes.
Fair enough. Kevin Delaney, thank you very much. Professor, is there any hope to correct American Putin compromise politics quickly?
I don't understand how Trump is this laser focused on it. I can't see how I have to understand him fully before I can answer that question. I just don't see it.
To create a solution, you need to properly understand the problem. Jim Smith, thank you very much for those on behalf of Greg.
Thank you, Jim. Ida Norwegian Kroner 119. She loves UA. She has the same name as my grandmother.
Awesome. And that was on my channel, so thank you. Putin Puppet on mine. So-called real estate negotiator Witkoff being 8 hours waiting during that signal chat in the Kremlin. I talked about this on my stream on orders of Trump and Putin. Fits perfectly in the Trump, Putin and Xi plan, helping the US people echo high treason. So this is the idea that with the signal debacle, Steve Witkoff had he joined the group. He was added to the group as he was in Moscow, and he was also made to wait for 8 hours in the Kremlin, if you remember, before getting to talk to Putin. And there's every chance that he was added to the group when he was in that time period of waiting, or around that time. And Signal is something, if you are on Wi-Fi, you can if you're using just your mobile phone, there's every likelihood, if you're using the Wi-Fi of either the public Wi-Fi, I mean, you've got to get Wi-Fi somehow. So if you are put on that Signal group and you're accessing the Kremlin Wi-Fi or mobile phone mask Wi-Fi, you are going to potentially be able to be hacked by the very best in the world at doing that stuff. The KGB in the freaking Kremlin.
Jonathan,
yes.
Excuse me. You are bringing new revelations to me. Professor, have you heard this?
So no, what he's saying is if he was on the Wi-Fi, but that's not.
Was he on Signal? He was added to the group while he was in the Kremlin.
He was
Is that a fact?
Signal on the 13th.
Yes. People have done the timeline. People have done the timeline of it.
Okay, then pause right there. Pause right there. That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Sure it is.
If you
100%.
Okay, we can just stop there. Okay, that's compromise. I'm sorry. Yeah. If you are at that level and you're going into the Kremlin to meet with Putin, you should have no mobile device on you. You don't understand Russia. Okay, back to the argument. Trump likes Putin.
I can't prove that, I don't know whether he had his mobile device on it, etc., etc. But that someone's done the time, two people have done timelines there, and he was added to the group at the time he was in Moscow, and he's made to wait for 8 hours. My guess was, well, I wonder whether that 8 hours was them scouring his phone.
Of course it was. I'm sorry. I can't.
It sounds a bit conspiracy theory.
But it's possible.
It seems very
can't prove it, but it's probable.
I will tell you this, guys, and this is a fact. When Jania and I get within 5 to 7 kilometers of any Ukrainian military position, we have to turn our phone systems off completely. Airplane mode only on our private Starlink. That is it. And that's the security that we run to keep our friends safe. And they do the same on the Ukrainian front line. And you're going to walk into the Kremlin on Signal?
Yeah.
Come on. Okay. Enough said.
So FOIC agreement will take effect on March 18th, 2025, a week ago. So the agreement has been violated before it was agreed upon. Are y'all freaking kidding me? Absolutely. As we talked about. Yeah. Well said, though. for sure.
Hungarian supporter right there. Big.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Papa
F1.
Dutch, and it's looking good in Hungary at the moment. The polls are looking much, much healthier. Does anything in that agreement mention consequences? So guess what it's worth. Yeah, and
Great
that's the thing.
statement. There are no consequences. Yeah, here's what the consequences are. I'm sorry. There is a consequence. Zelensky made the statement tonight that if Russia hits Ukrainian infrastructure, then Moscow will feel the pain. That's it. That's what he said. So,
which was kind of like the theory before Trump was elected. He said, look, if they don't agree to this, then we'll come down really hard on them with weapons and sanctions and blah blah blah.
Will that
happen?
I will tell you this right now. Ukraine has not launched a long-range drone tonight yet, and soldiers are in here complaining about it right now because we're getting hit hard again. Now Zaporizhia and Mykolaiv again, and the soldiers are in here going, let's launch, let's launch, let's launch. So Ukraine trying, man. They're trying.
Yeah. You're all amazing. I love it when your minds and hearts connect. We will never abandon Ukraine, and its identity is more recognized than ever before in human history by millions of additional friends. A point that I've made a number of times. That's a really good point, John Doe there. So thank you. Mark Bisque, total legend. As with Russia dismissing Kellogg, Ukraine must refuse Witkoff's participation in the negotiations as his views are too heavily aligned with Russia. I think so.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
But this goes back to there must be something so powerful that the Americans hold over Ukraine in order that they can't demand things like this, that they are beholden to what the US says.
You wouldn't take Kellogg? We don't take Witkoff.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hello,
Mark and Elena. Perfect.
Yeah. I'd like to see Trump try to change Putin $1 million per violation. Charge him $1 million per violation. Yes.
Papa Dutch on the roll tonight.
Stephen Bendar, going to be speaking to him on a live tomorrow. Russia's playing the US as a fiddle. How incompetent can the Trump regime possibly be? Or is this simply what they want? Trusting Russia is stupid anyway. Absolutely, yes. Pertinent questions. Papa Dutch, dollars only, no rubles. Super generous. Jim Smith, really kind for Greg.
Thank you, Jim.
John Doe, for one of you guys, the truth will come out. Krasnov will be exposed. He definitely spent time with Epstein. Well, we definitely know that for sure. He was on the flight record 7 times. And the Epstein audio came out before the election. It didn't have that much effect, but he was saying that he was one of Trump's best mates for like 10 years or something. And that was coming from the mouth of Jeffrey Epstein. And anyway, we know how morally degenerate all these people are. I won't get a disagreement from me. Daniel Stenstam says Europe must join the conflict. Yeah. It will take years to undo all of the damage Trump has done. Trump is evil, says Dunk on you. And then also gifts some memberships, really generous for you. Yeah.
And I would just go back and refer, and I know Jonathan with Silicon Curtain was on with us for a large part of the show tonight. He made the statement, or it might have been you, Johnny Pierce, but I think it was Jonathan Fink. You know, we're only 3 months into this, and this is the level at what we're talking.
2 months. 2 months.
Yeah, 2 months.
21 months to go before there's a huge check, because there's going to be a landslide reversal against Trump, in my estimation, in the midterms. I think they're doing way too much. It's disconcerting to the American population. So the natural check is going to be kicking into place in 21 months.
Yeah, I think that's probably likely. Per Lusberg, I'm starting to feel like Trump isn't really home anymore. Mentally, that is what makes it even more important to understand who's whispering in his ear. I genuinely agree with that to some degree. I think just naturally, the age he is, he's not going to be on it. He doesn't read. He doesn't take intelligence briefings. The guy is fundamentally lacking of knowledge, but also I think he's in mental decline. Marcia Jones, thank you very much. That's really, really generous. Zoe Blackmore, thanks to you, just joined. The OPEC breach was made on hackable, commercially available app, while Witkoff was very safely a guest at the Kremlin at the time. So that's exactly what we are just talking about.
Exactly.
AJ Simo, thanks so much, matey. Really appreciate that. Gifting them memberships. Just not good. Said in the past, I'm ashamed. Now I want a divorce. Awesome. Liberty, says Nurse Sean, liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people and who have a right and a desire to know. John Adams, 1765.
Nurse Sean, been a supporter of our channel for a long time when we were even small out there in California. Thank you, Sean. And that's spot on. And I'm sure our forefathers are rolling in their graves right now.
Just Not Good says Johnson against a majority in Congress and public equals tyranny. Well, yeah. And thank you, Just Not Good. F. Oink again from Hungary. Extradition without process, controlling the press, ignoring court orders, threatening to prosecute vandalism as terrorism. What do you mean, no tyranny, Prof. Gerdes? I presume that's direct to you, Darren. There, but yeah, words which we've talked about already, I guess. And then saying it again on my channel as well. So thank you very much. Obviously taking issue with you not thinking it's tyranny, Darren.
So I'm just extra careful on these things before I'm going to call something. I think it's terrible policy, terrible rhetoric, terrible. But to go to the place where I'm calling it tyrannical, I'm not seeing it the same way you are. Maybe we're sliding into that. That could be, but I'm just not there yet.
So I think words are important. So I quite often say that Trump is fascistic rather than saying he is a fascist. And I think here I'd say he's tyrannical rather than he is a tyrant.
So I'm not sure how many people are going to catch the distinction.
Yeah, I think it's more important with tyranny because a tyrant, as in he's not yet a tyrant.
There's a legal definition of tyrant that I can't say that he is because I don't have the proof.
He's
what
tyrannical and he's wanting to
I won't say anything until I can prove it. I have to be able to show that this is clearly that.
He doesn't care for democracy, Trump, one iota.
No, he cares about himself. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think what will be interesting to watch, looking at the definition, a cruel and oppressive ruler.
But there's a legal definition.
I understand that.
You're using a general notion, not a legal definition, and I'm not going to go there without.
I don't know that tyrant is a legal term.
There are. If you go back to the American founding fathers and their arguments about what the king was, for example, there's Anyway, we're not going to litigate that again.
We'll finish, but let me help Prof out here. Because the legal definition, who seizes power illegally, is in the definition, and he didn't seize power illegally. He was elected. America is split right down the middle. So that is not tyranny.
But you could then argue around the sides that he is maintaining power illegally. So
how is he maintaining power illegally? He hasn't done anything yet. He could do something, but he hasn't.
Unconstitutionally.
So when he gets there, I'll agree with you. But
he's there now. Like I think he's in violation of the First Amendment. I think there are. I think what he's doing with the judiciary is highly suspect. I think you can make a good case that there are unconstitutional things going on at the moment. But
again, everybody in the chat saying, Prof, you keep defending Trump. I'm not. I'm just trying to make sense of the guy.
This is so you've got it. Who's okay? Tell me this, Prof. Who is one of his best mates in the world on the world stage? Who do you see him most often accept to Mar-a-Lago and to talk with and see at conferences?
Are you talking about Boris?
No, Viktor Orban. So I would argue
Boris Johnson seems to be the guy that's most like
similar
in that. And Boris is kind of crazy in his own right, but
so Boris Johnson's not been accepted into Mar-a-Lago with the national flags and literally a red carpet. He's not been at CPAC multiple times. The point is that he talks consistently about Viktor Orban being the greatest leader in Europe, right? So the question is, what's Viktor Orban done?
He might not be there for very long. Did you see the poll today?
Exactly. So that's what I was saying earlier about like the polls is looking good for democracy. Hopefully, fingers crossed in Hungary. But that is the leader that Trump very much looks up. The one he looks up to most in Europe.
He tends to like these kind of guys for some reason that's just bizarre.
So it's a little bit more complicated with Viktor Orban, though. So it's not just about looking up to him. So it's about the connections between Viktor Orban and the Hungarian state and Russia, interestingly, and the Heritage Foundation.
And that's tragic. Heritage used to be a solid conservative organization that turned into this MAGA cesspool. It's weird.
Heritage has really close ties and receives funding from the Danube Institute and the Bettany Foundation from Hungary, which is Viktor Orban's propaganda wings, putting money into them. So he's been to CPAC a bunch of times. CPAC's been in Budapest twice. So Viktor Orban is an absolute darling of not only Putin, here's the important part, of Project 2025 and Heritage Foundation. So if you're looking at what Trump is doing now, Viktor Orban is the blueprint. Right. So when you're talking about controlling the media and removing and starting to control, when you talk about Viktor Orban controlling the judiciary and the media, then take that as something that Trump is almost certainly trying to emulate. Is my point. There is not just he looks up to Orban. I think there's emulation going on there as well.
I can't prove that that's the case. You might be right, but I can't prove it. That's my plight.
And when you have Tucker Carlson's father on the board of directors for the company that lobbies for Viktor Orban, and Tucker Carlson's son is a speechwriter for JD Vance, then you start joining the dots up.
Tucker Carlson's son is a speechwriter for Vance?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
As far as I'll go and check that out, but I'm pretty sure
I didn't know that.
And Tucker, if you want to know who has Trump's ear in regard to Ukraine and Russia, it's definitely Tucker.
Yeah.
And Prof, I would just say this because there's a comment that's stuck over here. So guys, we see a back screen in here with all the comments and all this stuff. Rick Van Veen. Oh, please. Hitler was elected democratically before all hell broke loose. Okay. So I just think that people in general,
great point,
left, right, middle, whatever, are just seeing tendencies, historical patterns.
No, nobody's arguing that, but is it the same stuff or is it something different?
I don't think we know yet. Agreed.
Yeah. I'm just going to absolutely spam through some of these ones as well, because there are so many, and I just feel bad. If you need to go, Darren, like
I really do. I really did like an hour ago, but I'll leave this on so people can hear whatever your comments are.
Yeah, so just by the way, it's Buckley Carlson. That's the son, and he is on JD Vance's press team. So dunk on you. Thank you very much. The U.S. government is now cacistocracy. Cacistocracy
government
is a
by the
term.
least suitable of competent citizens of a state.
Yeah. Stephen Bendell, Jonathan ×2, and Greg, you are right about Trump. Oh, it's lucky that Darren's gone then.
Nobody's still listening.
Oh, is he still? Sorry. Thanks, Stephen.
No, I'm getting ready to get a call from Prof.
The Radio Tuck Trumpet. Remember in 2017, the uproar about Trump putting his assets in a blind trust, not a peep this time round. This is an example of the Overton window already moving. At some point, you wake up and realize it's already too late. And that's a kind of boiling frog in a pot. That was what you're just talking about with regard to Hitler was elected, democratically. And then it's about the backsliding bit by bit by bit. AJ Simon, but thank you very much, Radio Tuck Trumpet. AJ Simon is Prof. Curtis. Thinks we shouldn't take Trump's threats seriously. Could he please explain what he thinks Trump is trying to achieve by making them against Democratic allies? That is a really good question.
That's a great question. And see on that, and I know Prof is listening right now. That's my issue as a conservative. Like, do I think anything will happen with Canada? Most likely not. Do I think something potentially will happen with Greenland? Oh, heck yeah. I think there's something there that's stuck in the craw. But regardless of that, we have destroyed through the rhetoric our relationships with all of our friends and allies.
Tangible effect of the rhetoric.
It's a tangible effect. Really
important point, Greg. Just internationally, you have burnt some bridges there.
And it's not hearsay, JP. Now, I know, it's not hearsay. These are quotes. And I know that he just screams stuff out, and you can say the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top, or it's shock value. And I get all of that. But you know what? It's like I could scream at my wife, "Oh, you don't look pretty today." Well, guess what? That's going to have an effect. You can't just put it as shock value. I've now damaged that relationship. And that has consequences. And in lieu of those consequences, we're looking at potential of literally World War III.
Yeah. 100%. And this is for Jonathan Fink. Get well soon, Jonathan, from someone who also had to stay in bed for a few days. Thanks again for the whole round. Papa Dutch, is there any difference between the KGB, FSB, and the mafia? I think they swallowed each other. Well, I would certainly say agree with what was being said earlier, that I think there is an element to, well, obviously Russia being a mafia state, but
behavioral patterns are the same. But I can tell you one thing: the KGB, FSB, they weigh deeper in the hole than the mafia.
Papa Dutch, could Trump be self-gaslit? I mean, there's a lot of hot air coming out of him, so possibly. The Little Whiskey Shop, thanks. This is awesome to see Mark on board. POTUS said on Global TV there was nothing classified in the Signal chat. Yeah, so this is wrong, because it clearly was. And actually, I heard Jeffrey Goldberg. I listened to two of his interviews today, and they're both fascinating. One on the Bulwark with Tim Miller, where he was like 100% is classified. And even like... yes, you can get into technical definitions of classified, but if it's not classified, what they were saying in the hearings was, if it's not, so some of the experts were saying this as they all not experts, Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe, it wasn't classified. It's like, if it's not classified, tell us what they said here and now. If it's not classified, you can tell us what was said. And they're like, oh, we can't tell you, type thing. It's like, so it was classified then. So there's a real issue going on with the idea whether it's classified or not.
JP, regardless,
you
just don't have those conversations on a Signal group and add a journalist and then push the blame everywhere else and then threaten, well, that's a horrible publication anyway, and they're going to be closed soon. The whole narrative is just wrong, all of it.
Yeah. Anyone seen the US-RU talks minutes? How do we know peace talks are not a pretext to conduct covert trade talks on behalf of Trump corporations with Ukraine as a bargaining chip? I think that's exactly what happened.
Agreed completely. I think we don't even need to see the transcript. What we can see is the results in what is being made public now. It was a majority trade talks. That's clear.
I absolutely think so. Number 3, consider demonic possession and influence, etc. Well, I wouldn't believe in that kind of stuff, but actually, looking at Trump and his lackeys, maybe. The problem with Professor Gerdes' argument is that MAGA believes him like he's a god. I fully think this. I've written articles on how there is a deification of Trump, and any criticism of him is akin to blasphemy. It's really important.
Dunk on you. Stay tuned, because you just gave everybody a commercial. This was actually what we were planning to come together and talk about with Jonathan Fink, Jonathan Pierce, and myself and Professor Gerdes, was about this very topic. And we will be back to it. So you guys stay tuned. It's shocking what is happening, especially you guys know I'm a conservative Christian. But it is disgusting what is happening in the nationalist Christian right movement with the Trump MAGAs who believe that he is Jesus walking around.
Yeah, and it's very similar with Elon Musk as well. Like the deification of him.
Different group, but the same thing is happening. We're seeing this behavior happening in different.
Where you can't, if you criticize them, it's like blasphemy. You cannot criticize. It's like, therefore, it's illegal to criticize. And I think there are real similarities.
Takes us right back around to the tyrannical discussion.
Yeah. I believe the professor is representative of how Trump is the president, because people can't believe what he really is. Time to wake up, Prof. An interesting point there. And thank you.
I will say this. Listen, guys, I know he takes a lot of heat in this regard, but I'm telling you right now, Prof is not a MAGA, and Prof is not even a pro-Trumper. Prof is just ethical in his analysis. And I know I probably just lost a lot of you right now, and that's okay. But I'm telling you, we're personal friends, and he just wants to find and prove the truth. And I'm telling you, as this comes out more and more and more, he will be a pounding voice against Trump and MAGA. I'm just please, I'm telling you that he's not. He's looking for truth. He just views it differently in how to get there than I do, and I view differently than Johnny does, and Johnny views different than Jonathan Fink does. But we're all fighting for the same thing. It's just different ways we approach it.
Papa Dutch, Wittkopf, yep, absolutely. German for head, by the way, Kopf, in case people were wondering. Papa Dutch trusts Trump must have had to put the meeting down as one of the 5 things he did on the list for Elon. Not quite sure what that is in reference to, but thank you anyway, Papa Dutch. John Doe, again, every psychiatrist on this in the world would say that it is the idea to grant a malignant narcissist with psychopathic traits unless power, nuclear weapons, and guaranteed immunity. I think I mistranslated some of that. Wake up, people. But yeah, I think, you know, he is a malignant narcissist with psychopathic traits, and he is craving after power. I think that to me makes sense. 2% paves the road for the next 2%, says F Oink. I guess that's throwing the spaghetti at the wall and 2% of it sticking, and then that's exactly allows right. Yeah. So Jim Smith, question for Gerdes: why did Trump remove the women's and people of color's names from Arlington's Veterans Cemetery website? Again, that is the anti-woke gone haywire. It's not about the libs and cons, it's good and evil. Yes,
great comment, Mertzi. Mertzi is a Ukrainian veteran, not a Ukrainian military veteran, but I mean a Ukrainian volunteer veteran from the U.S. And I won't give dates or nothing, but heading back to Ukraine to help, and got a partner going with him.
I think there's a lot going on in the US that is explained best by owning the libs. I think they're doing some ridiculously stupid things just because it owns the libs, and actually they're actually not particularly popular, but it's kind of still owning the libs, and that's a lot of what Doge is doing as well. So Gerdes, why do you think the whole entourage of the US admin is going to Greenland to watch a dog sled race? JD Vance and wife Mike Walls. It's interesting. However, I will say, but this is where I think Trump does believe what he says, but he gets pulled back by people around him. The last thing he said about Greenland was talk about the concept of Greenland as well, which is really weird. But he has toned some of his rhetoric about Greenland back, because I think he's been told that is actually now untenable. So there's a subtle change of his rhetoric on Greenland if you check. But again, it's not because he didn't believe originally that he could take Greenland.
Now let me go back, because you and I are always the ones that hang on here the longest. That is what Darren's saying. Is he will make these statements, then back up on it. Make these statements and back up on it. What we're saying, though, is the behavior in general is narcissistic and tyrannical. So you see what I'm saying?
Greg.
I'm not defending him. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying this is you just said.
But the backing up. So this is where I'm different to Prof. Gerdes, because he says he'll throw crazy stuff at the wall and then back up. But I would say the backing up is done not because he doesn't believe it and he never believed it. He believed it. He backs up because people around him who know better are the ones that rein him in.
So then we get to the point of who's speaking into his ears.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, he says things like the Gaza thing. He thought, that's going to happen. I've been listening to Jared Kushner, and this is all sound. And then he gets told, oh, by the way, it's never going to happen because Saudi Arabia aren't going to do it, Egypt aren't going to do it, Jordan aren't going to do it. And then he goes, oh, okay. So he did believe it, and then he changed his mind because he's pulled back by the people, but not because he didn't believe it in the first place, and he's pulling back.
I like Adam Brown's comment right there.
Trump wants a legacy no matter who he has to get it. I think that's absolutely true. And I said legacy earlier as being one of the driving things. Wittkopf is a Russian. His parental grandparents were born in the Russian Empire, or in Russia, I believe, Steve Wittkopf. Thank you for that, Cleonic. I've dealt with a narcissist firsthand. I can tell the prof that trying to rationalize the mindset is impossible. It's the same as trying to rationalize any mental disorder like anorexia. So thank you for that,
Cleonic. That's really it's very solid comment there. Yeah. And that's where we're at, trying to
rationalize something that is
correct.
Yeah. Michael Future, fertilizer deal is to replace Canadian potash. Yes. So this is So the attack on if Prof Gertis was still here, so there is a lot to Canada and a lot to economic coercion and a lot to wanting stuff from Canada that they really need. Potash, and if you can't get it from Canada, then lifting sanctions on Belarus and whatever. But yeah, that's why they want to do deals maybe with Russia to get hold of fertilizer as well, given that they're putting these tariffs on Canada and they might not get things from Canada. Stupidity in essence, thanks for this. From the European side, I can't see Putin re-entering the global community, at least not in Europe. He is so hated that no one rests before he is dead. I would broadly agree. It's going to be interesting to see when you have the US wanting to bring Russia back into the fold, or at least the Trump administration, wanting to bring Russia back into the fold, Europe not wanting that, and there's a natural huge tension there.
There's a comment in there, Greg. Be careful coming back. Customs might pick you up to question you about your activities there. That happened. That happened on my last coming in. It's happening for most people coming back from Ukraine right now. If you've been there multiple times.
Wow, yeah, that's bad. Papa Dutch again. What we need is not only peace but justice in our time, and that's why it was really good to hear the use of the term "just peace" by Rustem Umarov in his comments a couple of times. Okie dokie to Ukraine with love. Absolutely. Okie dokie's awesome supporter. Thank you so much. Mitch Mazarol. Thanks, gents. From a Canadian who's probably got himself like 15 guns now, ready for the Americans. He's there. Second Amendment. Oh, no, I'm Canadian. No, he probably hasn't. I don't know. Mitch, so thank you. Mitch, from one Mitch to another. Ashdown, could we do this same live but concentrating on solutions?
Great idea, Mitch.
Yeah. Papa Dutch, how come they can receive signal in the Kremlin when everything else in the West is unavailable? I don't know if signal is unavailable, but there's VPNs and all sorts that you can obviously use.
Oh, Signal is used. Okay, so guys, just so you know, Signal, the chatting, one of the messaging platforms, it's used all over Russia. It's used everywhere. Yeah. Additionally, in case you guys were wondering, Russia does use Starlink as well, right on the front lines. So
yeah.
So everything is everywhere, guys.
Blonde Bombshell, I presume for you. Big thank you to an amazing chat and panel. Love to all. That's amazing.
And I saw her say it in the chat. And Blonde Bombsheller is my mod coordinator, team leader, chief, queen, whatever, Queenie, young. I call her young lady in Discord. But I'll tell you this: she's making her first trip to Ukraine. And she's going with Mertzi. And the only reason I feel free to say it now is because I saw the chat roll by and she said, I'm going to with Ukraine with Mertzi. Yay. So thank you, Blonde Bomb. Yeah, I love it, man. It's awesome.
Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop has said, JP, you missed the point of my question. If POTUS, so the President of the United States, Trump, states to the world all is unclassified, surely all of it can be released legally. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And that's exactly what that's what I said about the hearings in Congress, saying, if it's not classified, then I think it's John Ratcliffe and a few others that were using this argument. If it's not classified, then you can show it to us now. And then they're like, okay, so it is classified, in which case it is inappropriate. But yeah, really great point, Mark. Ole Nielsen, thank you very much. That's absolutely amazing. And cheers, you must bed dry. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I must be dry. Yes, I do need a drink. That's for sure. Zoe Blackmore, if Trump believes or does not believe what he says is irrelevant because as a toddler in chief, his words and directions have damaging effect. And that was a point I was trying to make, that those words, and Greg then made that again, those words have tangible effects. So you can't just dismiss them.
That's okay. The pen's mightier than the sword. Okay, that's written word. The power of words is beyond description.
If you Trump unified Canada with his words.
Trump unified Ukraine when Vance when the debacle happened in the White House. It was instantaneous.
That's a really good point.
It was an instantaneous inoculation of adrenaline into the Ukrainian people. So, it's just the power of words. And I know that we have to look at what will be the after effect, what will actually happen, what will be the literal effect, what will be the end result. But man, we live in a different era in 2025. Everybody is on this stream right now. We've had thousands watching when all 4 channels were going, and you're on social media. The power of words are so changing. The power of imagery. You're going to leave here and scroll through Instagram. You're going to go check your messenger. You're going to go watch something on Netflix. Everything is media. And I need to stop there because it's frustrating to me that there is a lack, it's a carelessness of how damaging the words and the rhetoric.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, I'm not a Biden fan. You guys know that. I'm a conservative, okay? But one thing Joe Biden did not do is destroy our relationships with our allies and friends.
He was a responsible, you may
I don't agree with a lot of what he did
and blah blah blah. But actually he was a standard politician, right?
He didn't go around going, blankety blank you, France. I mean, Greenland. Come on. You just don't do that.
Yeah. Afrikeys, and then we've only got 5 of these left, so thank you. How great is the chance of the midterms being cancelled? Well, I think it's a very, very small probability, but it's greater than it was 2 months ago, is all I will say. And that probably tells you something. Mitch, thank you very much for that super sticker. It's super generous of you. F oink again. Trump is overstepping the powers entrusted to him. Yes, he seized those powers illegally, ergo tyrant. The question is he taking more powers at the moment, and how legal is what Doge is doing? What, firing people, purging places, doing what he's doing, saying what he's saying about the free media, free press, etc., etc.
Since we've gone this long, and F Oink's a big supporter there in Hungary, let me just make this statement: Trump overstepping powers entrusted to him, seized. He's meaning to say that those powers illegally, ergo tyrant. Here's the problem: when you have the action, I'm trying to really state this properly and politely. When you make blanket statements that an overwhelming large group of people in the United States, the MAGA group and those sympathetic for it, believe it is honey dripping from the vocal cords of Zeus. And those blanket statements, 90% of what is in them are wrong and 10% is accurate. You then create layers of narrative that will continue to erode the very society that we live in. My example being the blanket statement that U.S. aid is corrupt. We're going to destroy it because it's nothing but a left-wing propaganda machine and it's nothing but evil. And I could sit here and list hundreds and hundreds of wonderful things that U.S. aid has done. So when you do that, now that's gone. That is the overstepping. That is the Doge. That is this. This is what I think Prof is trying to say. You come in, you push it, you back up, then you come in and you push it. But the blanket state, it's the same thing. It's the blanket statements on Ukraine, the blanket statements on Russia. This is what we're experiencing in America right now, Johnny. And this is an American saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ida says sociopaths have supernatural faith in their own abilities and what they can achieve. Interesting observation. Papa Dutch, you've got to understand by training, Doc Gerdes deals strictly in fact, standards of proof or evidence. Thank you for that, Papa Dutch. John Panciotti, incredibly generous on my channel. Wow. Thank you for your hard work. Trump has made all Americans look like fools.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Papa Dutch. Yes.
I wouldn't disagree.
Well, I hope I don't look like a fool.
No, this is true. Yeah. No, actually, and I'm very careful these days to differentiate, Greg, when I talk about America's doing this or the US is doing that, and then I try and catch myself enough to say the Trump administration is doing this.
Well, because that's correct, sir. There is regardless of what you see out there, especially for those of you watching from foreign countries. And when I say foreign, it's not foreign if it's your home country, but I'm an American. So if you're not from America,
Yeah.
I would say this. There's still a massive amount of people that stand with Ukraine, support Ukraine,
Yeah.
donate, give, volunteer. I have yet, as Professor Gertis has said many times, I have yet to drive down a freeway, be in an airplane, be in a store, be anywhere in the United States where I have seen a flag or a bumper sticker that says I stand with Russia. But I have literally seen tens of thousands of blue and yellows everywhere. That is the reality. And you know what? Let's be thankful, because together globally, people from both sides, different viewpoints, doing the right thing, trying to fight for truth and justice as Ukraine is fighting for.
Absolutely. So
Even
just
the Brits.
one more left. Thank you, John Panciotti. That is insanely generous, by the way, and I truly am thankful. And stupidity in essence. Trump has unified Denmark. We have stars now on all European products in the supermarket. So Trump's words matter. Absolutely.
Great
And
point.
that's exactly the point I was making earlier. Like, do not dismiss his words. As you know, as someone said, it's not that it's true or untrue. It's they have an effect or they don't have an effect, and invariably they do have an effect. And that effect at the moment is to bring the world into unity against the US at a time when you've got this age of empires, when the Russian Empire arguably is doing what it's doing and is being bellicose. The Chinese Empire is doing what it's doing, and then you have all these other areas of the world that aren't necessarily pro-US, like the Middle East and areas of Africa, and you've got Europe, which, you know, as a democratic entity, the EU, Europe, EU plus with the UK and Norway. If you are saying stuff that's pissing them off, then do you know what? You are losing friends, and friends in this world. I think, you know, we've moved from, or it seems like Trump is trying to move from this era of using trade to influence people to using naked power to influence people. So that is going back to the 1700s, right? And I thought we'd grown out of that, but apparently not. And that is just pretty worrying.
I can tell you right now, coming in from Krivoy Rih, so every city they'll have like defense councils and guys that meet about the city defense and fortifications and all of that, just coming out with a statement. Fortunately, no one was killed, but there's massive destruction in Krivoy Rih tonight, all after these meetings. And guys can see right now, 50% of Ukraine, the second under air alarm. So I guess the question is, how's that working for you?
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see whether the US respond to that at all tomorrow, or whether they'll just quietly ignore it and just think, you know, well, we've done our bit. Well done us. Maybe there's a Nobel Peace Prize coming down the road. I don't know, mate.
I will just stand by my statement forever. If you're hunting for a peace prize, you're probably not qualified to get one.
Yeah,
let's do it by actions. And you know, it's like, come on.
Yeah. Well said, mate. That's a good place to leave it there. So, look, thank you so much to.
There was one more super chat came in from Bombsheller from membership. Love and hugs from the Cape May crew, Cape May, New Jersey. Thank you, BB, and blessings on your trip to Ukraine with Mertzi.
Absolutely.
We'll see you guys on Discord. If you guys haven't joined Discords, go join all these Discords here. It's wonderful places, lots of conversation. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your care so much on all 4 channels. And guys, when it comes down to it, the bottom line is we're all fighting our rear ends off every day to fight for truth and stand for Ukraine. Not only Ukraine now, but really trying to stand for justice, because it's just spilling over now. We can talk, you know, the Middle East, Europe, of course. Ukraine is, in my opinion, the epicenter of it all. But it's everywhere. It's happening in my country. It's in the United States. We have a global mess. So let's all fight for justice and truth together. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, and Greg no doubt has his obviously charity links in his description. Jonathan Fink is fundraising at the moment, and
Prof and I are getting ready to do a new one.
Right.
Yep.
But I'm doing one at the moment with Rick the Ukrainian and Roman Trokimets,
Oh,
and we
cool.
are 95% through to our goal. So that's very close. If anyone has a wherewithal and desire to aid that campaign, that would be fantastic. And then it's a car for Ukraine one after that. So there are the patches up there. There's a combined patch because we're doing it with the Ukrainian and the ATP Geopolitics NATO patch as well.
Beautiful.
If you guys can, that would be really appreciated. Help with that one. Link is in my description and I think pinned at the top of my live chat. Anyway, Greg, final words. I know you.
Final words is it's been awesome. It's been a great exchange of ideas, thoughts, viewpoints, and I think we've all come away from here learning something. And I think we've come away from here recognizing that there are different views. But we're fighting for the same thing. And I'm just honored to be in the same panel with you guys and appreciate, most importantly, your friendship.
Absolutely, Greg. It is always a pleasure and quite frankly, never a chore.
Never.
So,
but let me ask you one question, Johnny Pierce.
7.
As we close out.
42.
Is Donald Trump demon possessed?
It depends how you define demon. That's my philosophical answer. Well, it depends
We'll
how
leave
you
it right
define the
there.
question.
We'll leave it right there. Thank you,
Nice one.
everybody.
Slava Ukraini.
Cheers. Gerojem slava. Razom do peremog.